The story begins with a little boy having the time of his life on a swing, urging his older sister to push him higher. The boy leaps from the swing into the lake, enthusiastically encouraging his hesitant sister to try it too. The girl, nervous and skeptical, views it more as recklessness than fun. However, yielding to her brother's persistent urging, she reluctantly takes her place on the swing. The boy, feigning excitement, gives her a forceful push, causing her to tumble into the lake. She struggles in the water, panicking, feeling as though she cannot escape death and must resign herself to fate. The scene shifts to her previous life, where she was an ordinary graduate student. She recalls a team activity she participated in, climbing a small hill behind the campus with her professor and a lab assistant. Although she complimented the professor on his fitness, inwardly she grumbled about being forced into the activity after an exhausting night in the lab, resenting the intrusion on her weekend. During the climb, the professor nostalgically remarked that the place looked just as it did during his student days and decided to take a commemorative photo. She offered to take the picture, boasting about her photography skills. The professor agreed, asking her to ensure the background was appealing, even striking a pose. She praised his good proportions, implying the photo would look good because of him. However, the professor pointed out that the background wasn't framed well, asking her to step back a bit for a better angle. Just as she complied, she lost her footing and fell, her mind filled with the thought that she might actually be dying. Returning to the present, Kilian pulls her out of the lake, shaking her to check if she's all right. Though unsettled, she manages a smile and assures him she's fine, marveling at his future strength. Kilian, being the strongest, pouts and accuses her of scaring him by faking death again. She quickly apologizes, pretending it was just a joke gone too far, promises not to do it again, and suggests they play together. Inwardly, she worries about offending Kilian, knowing her future survival depends on winning his favor. She resigns herself to not just being a student, but to being completely subservient to him. After her death in her previous life from the photo incident with the professor, she found herself reincarnated, standing near a cemetery where people around her argued fiercely about what to do with her. One man refused to take her in, burdened by his own 5 children. Observing the situation, she realized she had been reborn as an unwanted orphan. She had small, chubby hands and barely reached the height of an adult's waist. The argument escalated as one woman tried to force her onto another person who angrily rejected her. Feeling nauseated and overwhelmed, she wished they would just send her to an orphanage. Her wish was unexpectedly echoed by the adults, who greedily discussed the money the orphanage offered for girls. Horrified by their intentions, she decided it was better to survive on her own and ran away. The group chased after her, shouting to catch her, but she slipped while running, just before hitting the ground. A noblewoman caught her, gently asking if she was all right. One of the women noticed her, pointed, and called out her name. She demanded the noblewoman hand over the child, but Reina clung tightly to the noblewoman, crying out that these people wanted to sell her into slavery. The noblewoman's expression turned serious as she questioned their intentions. The group hastily denied the accusation, claiming it was a misunderstanding and that Reina had simply misinterpreted the meaning of an orphanage. A nobleman intervened, stating that if they intended to send her to an orphanage, they could take responsibility for her instead. However, another man in the crowd argued that they couldn't entrust such a precious child to just anyone. He insisted on proof that the noble couple could properly care for her. In response, the nobleman handed them gold coins. Greed overcame their previous hesitation, and the group quickly accepted, declaring that it seemed the noble couple could indeed take good care of Reina. The noble couple turned out to be the Duke and Duchess, who transported Reina back to their estate in a carriage. During the journey, the Duchess comforted her, acknowledging that Reina must have been terrified and apologizing for not arriving sooner. Confused, Reina asked if the Duchess knew her. The Duchess explained that she had been Reina's mother's closest friend. She revealed that Reina's mother was a renowned noblewoman in society before eloping with Reina's father. The Duchess reassured Reina that she was safe now and promised to stay by her side from now on. Although uncertain about this sudden adoption, Reina clung tightly to the Duchess, declaring she wouldn't allow herself to be abandoned again. As they arrived at the estate, Reina marveled at its magnificence. wondering if this was what paradise felt like. Inside the estate, the Duke called for someone named Kilian, who appeared instantly. The moment Reina saw him, she was immediately captivated by his cuteness. From his long eyelashes to his adorable cheeks, she found him utterly irresistible. The Duke introduced Reina to Kilian, explaining she would be a new member of their family and encouraging them to become friends, as they were only 2 years apart in age. Kilian extended his hand for a handshake, greeting her politely. Reina was charmed by his small stature and lovely appearance. Finding him unbearably cute, she smiled, returned the greeting, and impulsively pinched his cheek, marveling at how soft it was, comparing it to a rice cake. She couldn't stop touching him, overwhelmed by his cuteness. However, Kilian was clearly displeased by her actions, making Reina realize her mistake. She apologized nervously, explaining she couldn't help herself because he was just too cute. The Duchess intervened to ease the tension, remarking that Reina seemed quite fond of Kilian and asking if Kilian liked her too. After a brief pause, Kilian agreed, much to Reina's relief. Kilian then asked if he could show Reina around the house. Delighted by their budding friendship, the Duchess agreed and encouraged them. Kilian took the lead, inviting Reina to follow him, promising to show her to her room. As Kilian climbed the stairs, Reina, captivated by his small form, couldn't resist the urge to pat his little bottom, following him excitedly. As she reached one step, she suddenly tripped and fell. Kilian nonchalantly remarked that the third step from the top was fake, designed to confuse thieves. As Reina vaguely registered this, she thought he could have warned her sooner. Kilian then led her to her room, presenting it with enthusiasm. Reina was stunned by the room's grandeur, realizing it was larger than the entire house she had lived in during her previous life. Kilian proudly pointed out a century-old tapestry, unveiling it dramatically. The dust from it flew directly into Reina's face, making her cough. She began to suspect Kilian might be doing these things intentionally, recalling how he hadn't even glanced back when she fell on the stairs. Nevertheless, when he asked if she was all right, she forced a smile and complimented the tapestry. Reina tried to convince herself she might be misinterpreting his actions. He was just a little boy, unlikely capable of deliberate mischief. However, her suspicions grew as Kilian's playful pranks continued. In the bathroom, he demonstrated how the faucet worked, activating a spell that released water, only for it to drench Reina completely. Soaked and frustrated, Reina tried to ignore Kilian, but he called out to her, asking why she was just standing there. Hesitantly, she approached him. Kilian demonstrated how to light the stove by pressing a button, but just as he did, Reina felt a sudden electric shock. Seeing her reaction, Kilian burst into laughter. Initially, Reina dismissed his antics as unintentional accidents, but as the tricks persisted, her suspicion mounted. Annoyed, she confronted him, asking if he was deliberately teasing her. Kilian feigned innocence, but the mischievous grin on his face betrayed his true intentions as she insisted he shouldn't cause trouble. He mockingly asked if she planned to tattle to their parents. When Reina threatened to tell the Duke and Duchess if he continued his pranks, Kilian's demeanor turned serious. He coldly reminded her that if their relationship soured, it would be she, not he, who would bear the consequences. His words filled her with anxiety as she contemplated her fragile position within the family. Unlike Kilian, their biological and undeniably adorable son, Reina's connection to the Duchess was tenuous, relying solely on her late mother's past friendship. Nevertheless, she resolved that, come what may, she would not allow herself to be cast out and sent to an orphanage. Reina asked Kilian if he hated her, which he promptly confirmed. Shocked, she pressed him for a reason, but his response was dismissive, leaving her both confused and taken aback. She tried to make sense of his words, but her thoughts were interrupted as she noticed a portrait with a plaque beneath it reading 35th Duke of Astria. The name Astria struck her as unusually familiar, and she began piecing the clues together. Duke Astria, Kilian Astria. Suddenly, the truth dawned on her. Kilian Astria was the male lead, the strongest character from the novel she had read in her previous life. While incredibly powerful, Kilian was known for his antisocial personality and lack of empathy. In the story, he had an older sister of commoner origin who, despite not being the legitimate heir, acted arrogantly as if she were the mistress of the duchy. She severely bullied the female lead under the guise of being a sister-in-law, ultimately meeting her end at Kilian's hands. Reina grew anxious, pondering why Kilian hated her. She wondered if it was because she had pinched his cheek earlier, realizing that someone as proud as him wouldn't appreciate such familiarity from a stranger. Recalling Kilian's grudge-holding nature from the novel, she feared she had already provoked him. Determined not to give up, she decided to find a way to win his favor. To this end, Reina began observing Kilian in secret. On the 5th day of her observation journal, she noted little progress. She discovered Kilian preferred training alone, and worried that if their relationship didn't improve, she might become his next target. One day, as she watched him practice archery from behind a bush, he skillfully hit the bull's eye. Just as Reina contemplated the danger of becoming his target, Kilian called out, having caught her spying. Nervous, she tried to hide, but he told her he had known all along she was following him. Trying to mask her intentions, Reina nervously suggested she wanted to be friends with him. However, Kilian bluntly rejected the idea, causing her to panic internally. She realized she desperately needed to find a way to gain his favor before things worsened. Eager to curry favor with Kilian, Reina quickly offered to retrieve his arrows for him. Despite her determination, she struggled to pull the arrows from the target, growing increasingly flustered as Kilian urged her to hurry. In her panic, she finally retrieved the arrows and began to flatter him. Handing over the arrows, Reina praised Kilian effusively, calling his skills impressive and remarking on his imposing presence. She added that his performance as an archer was so astounding it nearly made her swoon. Reina even claimed he might be the best archer in the country. Kilian, expressionless, calmly corrected her, stating that the best archer was his father. Taken aback, Reina quickly covered her mistake, saying Kilian was destined to claim the title in the future. Internally, she cringed, realizing she must look like a sycophant trying to survive beside a tyrant. However, she convinced herself that flattery was her best strategy for survival and vowed to persevere and make it work, no matter what. A few days later, Reina entered the library, where Kilian waited behind a bookshelf. He asked if she had brought the item, and Reina handed him a box of macarons. With a sly smile, Kilian praised her for a job well done. Reina, seeking compensation for her efforts, asked for a share of the treats. Kilian scoffed, calling her childish. But after a moment's thought, he reluctantly handed her 2 macarons, claiming it was a sign of maturity. Reina thanked him, their secret dealings in the library continuing. As time passed, during a tea party with the Duchess and Kilian, the Duchess offered Reina macarons, explaining they were a recent treat brought from the capital. She revealed she had always wanted to share such delicacies with a daughter, as neither the Duke nor Kilian cared for sweets. Reina recalled that during tea times, she was the only one eating macarons, and it seemed everyone had noticed. Grateful for the Duchess's kindness, she expressed her thanks happily, eagerly tasting the treat. The crisp shell crumbled, revealing a thick jam filling, which she found delicious. The Duchess then suggested Kilian try one, mentioning that since his sister enjoyed them so much, he might too. Initially, Kilian seemed interested but quickly changed his mind, hesitating before firmly stating that sweets were only for children. Reina was surprised, as he had looked like he wanted to try one. Despite his denial, the Duchess remained unfazed, offering the remaining macarons to Reina, suggesting she save them for later if she couldn't finish them. Reina accepted, though Kilian's glare made her realize she probably wouldn't be able to eat them all at once. Reina warned Kilian that eating too many sweets might make him sick, but Kilian, munching on a macaron, dismissed her concerns, insisting they weren't sweet and teasing her for liking them like a child. Reina defended her love for sweets, asking what was wrong with liking them. Kilian retorted that sweets were childish, claiming cool adults didn't eat them, like the Duke and Duchess. He even boasted about being an adult since the age of 2, which Reina found amusing, sarcastically praising his maturity. Kilian handed her half the box of macarons, instructing her to take them discreetly. Peeking from behind the bookshelf, he hinted she might want chocolates, and hard candies too. Reina immediately understood, showing exaggerated enthusiasm so the Duchess would know she wanted plenty of both. Kilian grinned, calling her hopeless, and she playfully agreed, offering her services whenever he needed them. Reflecting on their exchange, Reina hoped to maintain their lukewarm relationship, believing it was the best way to survive. One day, a girl named Olivia rudely confronted Reina, asking if she was a commoner. Confused, Reina hesitantly confirmed, wondering what Olivia wanted. Olivia, the daughter of Viscount Humphrey, commented haughtily that if she were Reina, she'd be too ashamed to show her face. Slightly annoyed but composed, Reina pondered Olivia's rudeness, noting she only showed her true colors when adults and Kilian weren't present. Olivia continued, predicting Reina would struggle in the social circles. Reina then calmly replied that she had no intention of joining such circles, dismissing Olivia's insults. She walked away, sarcastically telling Olivia to feel ashamed for herself. Internally, Reina completely dismissed the idea of entering society, focusing on her true goal, achieving independence before Kilian came of age. She recalled the original story, where Kilian was notorious for his terrible personality, plotting to overthrow his father after falling for the heroine. Following the events, the Duke and Duchess were exiled and the adopted daughter was swiftly executed. Despite her improving relationship with Kilian, Reina knew she couldn't take chances. For now, she prioritized gaining his favor while saving money for independence, determined to leave once she came of age. Just as Reina reached for the door to leave, Olivia, looking irritated, loudly demanded if she was being ignored. Reina mentally dismissed Olivia's outburst, thinking that no amount of shouting from her could affect her. Suddenly, Kilian entered the room, capturing Reina's attention. She offered him a brief greeting, but before she could say more, Olivia rushed towards Kilian, calling his name with excessive sweetness. Olivia asked where he had been, claiming she had been looking for him for a while. Watching Olivia try to get close to Kilian, Reina felt uneasy about the situation. Kilian appeared indifferent, simply telling Olivia to follow him. Olivia turned haughtily to Reina, stating she couldn't join them because she didn't want to play with her. Before leaving, Kilian turned back to Reina with a wicked smile, telling her to wait for him, as he would be back soon. Then he walked away with Olivia. Left behind, Reina grew anxious. Kilian's sinister smile and the sight of him leaving with Olivia stirred a deep sense of unease within her. Her apprehension seemed justified when Kilian eventually returned alone later that evening. Olivia's mother was frantic, shouting at the household staff, demanding to know where her daughter was. Her voice trembling with urgency, she turned on Reina, accusing her of negligence. She demanded an explanation, yelling that as the eldest one present, Reina should have been more responsible. Kilian, looking concerned, stepped forward to defend Reina, explaining it wasn't her fault. He revealed that Olivia had refused to play with a commoner, subtly shifting the blame onto Olivia's own actions. Olivia's mother froze, murmuring denials, her face pale with shock and fear. She asked tearfully where Olivia could possibly be, her desperation palpable. Kilian, maintaining his composure, smoothly lied that Olivia had mentioned going to the restroom, but he wasn't entirely sure. The atmosphere in the room grew tense as everyone's anxiety mounted. The Duke, realizing the gravity of the situation, immediately took charge. He ordered his guard to commence a thorough search both inside and outside the mansion. As the guards mobilized to carry out his command, Olivia's mother collapsed, sobbing loudly, her anguish filling the air. Kilian, meanwhile, sat calmly before the desserts, indulging nonchalantly and remarking that dinner would now be delayed for quite some time. Reina was speechless at the scene, watching him eat his dessert without hesitation. Gathering her thoughts, she hesitantly asked if he truly didn't know where Olivia had gone. Kilian replied carelessly that he did not know. Reina found herself doubting his words, pondering the contradiction between the Kilian she observed and the Kilian depicted in the novel. The Kilian she saw quietly endured lessons far beyond a child's capacity and completed rigorous training without complaint. He behaved maturely and treated the servants with respect. However, if the novel's portrayal was closer to his true self, Olivia's fate might already be sealed, a thought that filled Reina with dread. Despite her growing unease, Reina carefully probed further, mentioning Olivia's claim about going to the restroom, and asked if Kilian knew which direction she might have headed. Kilian's demeanor shifted as he sharply questioned why she was so concerned about Olivia when she clearly disliked her. His words startled Reina, but before she could respond, Kilian began listing the available restrooms. The one in the butler's quarters, the one in the maid's area, and the one in the unused guest room. Reina suddenly realized the guest room restroom was out of order. Kilian explained he had instructed everyone to use the butler's restroom instead. However, Reina countered that Olivia would never condescend to use the same restroom as the servants. Kilian agreed, adding that he had explicitly warned against going to the guest room restroom. Listening to him, Reina gloomily pondered the saying that a fallen angel might be worse than a demon. Reina ran through the mansion, frantically searching for Olivia. Kilian followed behind her, also calling Olivia's name, though his tone held far less concern. Overwhelmed by the sheer size of the mansion, Reina lamented how difficult it was to search such a vast place. Kilian, clearly unbothered, suggested they abandon the search and enjoy some chocolates instead, even offering her 2 exquisite candies with an almost mocking tone. Reina couldn't help but wonder where he had picked up such bizarre, kidnapper-like lines. Stealing her resolve, she refused a suggestion, stating her genuine desire to find Olivia. When Kilian questioned if she was truly that fond of Olivia, Reina deflected, choosing instead to trust her instincts. After a moment, Reina spotted a clue and hastily opened a door, shouting Olivia's name. Inside, she found Olivia weeping, her hair caught in a malfunctioning magic sink. Olivia sobbed uncontrollably, begging for help. Reina approached cautiously, assessing the situation while trying to calm her down. Realizing it was impossible to safely untangle Olivia's hair, she decided it would have to be cut, but Olivia vehemently refused, wailing at the thought of losing her hair. Searching for something sharp, Reina found a letter opener. Just as she was about to use it, Olivia screamed again, causing Reina to whirl around in alarm. To her shock, she saw Olivia was now free, yet her hair had been severed, with Kilian standing nearby, holding the cut locks. Olivia collapsed onto the floor, crying over her ruined hair. Reina stood stunned, thinking how insane the situation had become. With a sinister smile, Kilian mockingly declared that he had saved Olivia, the one Reina supposedly cherished so deeply. Suppressing her true feelings, Reina feigned excitement and thanked Kilian, playing along with his twisted sense of heroism. Olivia's father, the Viscount, expressed his gratitude, overjoyed that Kilian had rescued Olivia. However, Kilian corrected him with surprising humility, stating that it was Reina who had actually found Olivia. Still upset, Olivia complained about Kilian cutting her hair. Reina mused internally that perhaps it would have been better if Kilian had just cut it to shoulder length instead of making such a mess. However, the Viscount and Viscountess quickly defended Kilian, with the Viscount praising Olivia's new look, claiming she looked even prettier now. The Viscountess, meanwhile, offered false praise for Kilian's skill, marveling that he was talented even at cutting hair. Reina watched their behavior in disbelief, wondering if Kilian had orchestrated the entire event just to receive their constant adulation. She recalled his meticulous nature, remembering how he perfectly cut steak even at the dinner table, showing no remorse for his actions. The Duchess interrupted the praise for Kilian, acknowledging Reina's efforts and expressing her pride. She emphasized that without Reina's determination, Olivia might not have been found. The Duke agreed, stating that everyone should be thanking Reina. The Viscount and Viscountess, visibly uncomfortable, hesitated before reluctantly thanking Reina. Witnessing their perfunctory response, Reina inwardly smirked, thinking how predictable their behavior was. Outwardly, she maintained her composure, simply replying, "You're welcome. I only did what I had to do." The Viscountess suddenly remembered gifts for the children and presented Kilian with monster-shaped dolls made by a famous artisan, featuring designs like giant crows and dragons. She also gave him a gold coin as a reward for cutting Olivia's hair, leaving Reina astonished at the display of such generosity. Meanwhile, the Duchess handed Olivia a gift and some pocket money, much to her delight. Reina watched, wondering if she might receive something too, hoping for at least pocket money, or perhaps even a gold coin. The Duchess then mentioned it was Reina's turn for a gift, but the Viscount awkwardly claimed he hadn't prepared anything, suspecting it was because she was from the commoner's district. Reina smiled and said she would be content with just pocket money. The Viscount harshly called her greedy, leaving Reina flustered and anxious, while the Duke teased the Viscount for his behavior. Meanwhile, the Duchess added sarcastically that they only had enough to give Kilian pocket money. The Duke, addressing the Viscount's earlier comment, mentioned rumors of their financial difficulties and offered to give Reina pocket money on their behalf. He then presented Reina with a custom-made doll crafted by a skilled artisan and adorned with real jewels. This left Reina astonished, yet slightly overwhelmed by the generosity. As Reina admired the gift, Kilian's gaze shifted towards the Viscount and Viscountess. The couple was visibly terrified, pleading with each other for support. Reina watched this unfold, confused, wondering why Kilian was staring at them with such an intense and dangerous look, instead of at her. That night, clutching a pillow, Reina knocked on Kilian's door, hesitantly asking if they could sleep together. She felt anxious, worried about potential dangers during the night, and decided to stay with Kilian to ensure his safety. Still, she lamented how her life plans had been disrupted. A sleepy Kilian opened the door, asking why she was there. Reina nervously admitted she was scared to sleep alone. Kilian took her hand and led her inside, calling her a scaredy cat, which she agreed with. After they settled into bed, Kilian urged her to sleep well. Reina held his hand tightly, believing it would prevent him from running away. Feeling exhausted, Reina began to drift off, only to be jolted awake when Kilian suddenly called her name. Kilian asked Reina why she was so nice to Olivia, pointing out that Olivia had always been mean to her. Reina, nervous and unsure how to respond, hesitated, questioning her own thoughts and finding Kilian's expression momentarily cute. She realized his beauty often distracted her, causing her to overlook many things. When Kilian repeated the question, Reina felt frustrated but tried to remain calm, replying that being cute forgives everything. Mulling over her own words, she realized this applied to Kilian as well. To deflect further questioning, she praised Kilian, calling him cool, thinking it the perfect diversion. Reina recalled that calling anything cute in front of Kilian could result in pinched cheeks, remembering how he acted like he was selling candy when they first met. Kilian asked if she was okay, and Reina quickly denied ever thinking Olivia was cute. Satisfied, Kilian lay back down, simply replying that he understood. To Reina's surprise, Kilian embraced her as he fell asleep, wishing her good night. Shocked, Reina couldn't help but find him irresistibly cute. She responded, wishing him good night too. As she drifted off, she compared her feelings for Kilian to those of a cat owner towards their pet. Despite knowing what Kilian would become, she admitted his cuteness sometimes clouded her judgment. She hoped things would calm down once Olivia left, allowing them some distance. In the middle of the night, Kilian woke up, reflecting on his actions and feelings. He wondered if he had forgotten his role as a subordinate. He thought about how Reina said she liked Olivia because she was cute, yet he had punished Olivia for tormenting his sister. Despite this, it felt like only he was being viewed strangely. Kilian pondered how unreliable a subordinate he must seem. Since they first met, Reina had often called him cute, but now her attitude seemed to have changed, insisting he wasn't cute at all. Kilian, who hated being called cute, couldn't understand why she seemed irritated while denying his cuteness. Despite these thoughts, Kilian decided it didn't matter to him. Reina was his only precious subordinate, the one constant in his life. He wished her good night again with a satisfied expression. The next day, Olivia approached Reina, clutching her doll. Reina was reading a book, with Kilian sitting beside her, also engrossed in a book. When Reina noticed Olivia standing there, she asked what was wrong. Trembling with fear, Olivia hesitantly asked Reina if she could accompany her to the restroom. Seeing this as a prime opportunity to tease Olivia, Reina playfully remarked that she didn't want to go. Olivia flinched nervously, asking if she was serious. Knowing Olivia was scared and thinking she might regret teasing her, Reina changed her mind. Just as she was about to agree, Olivia grabbed her hand, urgently pulling her along and shouting for her to hurry. Caught off guard by the sudden action, Reina stumbled after her. Olivia and Reina were playing together, with Olivia taking on the role of a princess, urging Reina to save her from a monster. Although Reina didn't feel like playing, she reluctantly joined in, pretending to fight the monster. Kilian, playing the monster with a maid's hair accessory perched on his head like dragon horns, angrily questioned Reina about Olivia's behavior. Reina recalled how her small acts of kindness towards Olivia, holding her hand, helping her wash, catching a spider, had somehow escalated into this exaggerated scenario. Olivia excitedly declared that if the monster was defeated, she would marry the prince. Reina nervously played along. Kilian, clearly displeased, asked Reina if she was really going to marry Olivia. Startled, Reina tried to appease him, but Kilian demanded that Reina marry him instead, reasoning that Reina had once said he was cuter than Olivia. Finding Kilian quite adorable in that moment, Reina attempted to smooth things over. However, Olivia protested, declaring that she was going to marry Reina. Kilian retorted, asking if Olivia could buy more presents than him, stemming from his understanding of marriage as living happily and exchanging gifts. Reina mused that this idea likely originated from the Duke and Duchess, who often gave each other gifts outside of special occasions. Reina agreed to Kilian's playful suggestion, but their light-hearted moment was interrupted by the arrival of the Duchess. Overhearing Kilian, she sternly reminded him that they were family. Even if he liked Reina, marriage between siblings was impossible. Kilian nervously tried to defend himself, but the Duchess remained firm. She stressed the importance of teaching aristocratic children that marriage was a serious matter. However, quickly realizing she had become somewhat agitated, she decided to take Kilian aside for a private talk. She led Kilian away, leaving Reina and Olivia to continue playing, telling them to have fun. Kilian was absent for some time after that, and a few days later, Olivia returned home, clinging dramatically to Reina in farewell. Shortly after, Kilian reappeared. Surprised and worried, Reina asked where he had been. Kilian explained he had been with his mother, but he changed the subject, wanting to give Reina a gift. He presented his most treasured possession, his #1 favorite snack box. Shocked, Reina asked why he was giving it to her. Kilian earnestly explained that it was the most precious thing to him, and he wanted to give it to his sister as a token of his affection. Then, with utmost seriousness, he proposed again, asking her to marry him. Reina reflected on this unexpected turn of events, realizing she had just received a marriage proposal from the most important character in the novel, someone who had once hated her. She wondered when their relationship had changed so drastically. Smiling, she gently reminded Kilian that siblings couldn't marry, but his determined response brought a smile to her face. She playfully accepted his make-believe proposal, and Kilian, overjoyed, hugged her tightly. Reina found his affection irresistibly cute. She imagined how romantic it would be when he finally met the heroine and fell in love. Swept up by his cuteness, she impulsively nibbled his cheek, only to grow anxious moments later upon realizing what she'd done. Kilian, shy yet earnest, suggested they run away together, leaving Reina bewildered by his meaning. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the manor, the Duke and Duchess were discussing Kilian's history of mischief. The Duke wondered aloud if a week's confinement was perhaps too severe, but the Duchess sharply reminded him of Kilian's more audacious escapades, such as the time he'd rendered the Viscount and Viscountess completely bald. Despite the reprimands he'd received, Kilian had shown absolutely no remorse. The Duchess confessed that crafting wig for the unfortunate victims had significantly drained her magical reserves, underscoring the urgent need for Kilian to receive proper guidance. The Duke, albeit reluctantly, conceded her point, acknowledging the truth in her words. Just then, a servant burst into the room, breathlessly informing the Duke that Kilian had overpowered his guards and made his escape. Incensed by his son's incorrigible antics, the Duke roared in frustration. At that very moment, Kilian was urgently insisting to Reina that they needed to flee the estate immediately, much to her growing irritation. She vividly recalled spending an entire night attempting to dissuade him from his foolish plans, only for the true weight of his words, his plea to escape, to finally strike her a week later as they rode in the carriage towards the National Foundation Day celebration. The Duchess warmly complimented Reina on her dress, remarking how beautifully it suited her. Reina, with becoming modesty, attributed the choice entirely to the Duchess's excellent taste. The Duchess laughed, playfully speculating about the queue of potential suitors who might line up seeking Reina's hand during the festivities. Overhearing this, Kilian leaned in, whispering angrily to Reina that attending the event was far too dangerous, and again urged her to run away with him. Reina, utterly perplexed, couldn't fathom his persistent obsession with escaping. She silently reaffirmed her own plan. She would escape alone, but only after she had saved enough money. The Duchess cut in sternly, reminding Kilian that as a member of the revered Astoria family, and indeed as the guest of honor for the National Foundation Day celebration, his absence was simply unthinkable. Reina absorbed this information with surprise. Despite her knowledge gleaned from the novel, she hadn't been aware that the very first emperor, the founder of the empire, was in fact the first Duke of Asturias. However, finding the complexities of statecraft rather tedious, he he had ultimately abdicated the throne, passing it to his prime minister. Reina mused inwardly on the uncanny resemblance between Kilian's temperament and that of his ancestor. The Duke, swelling with pride, added that this year's celebration held particular importance, because it marked Lady Reina Storia's first official appearance at such an event, making the occasion even more special for the Astoria family. At the grand venue stood Duke and Duchess Astoria, accompanied by the young Lord Kilian and Lady Reina. As they made their grand entrance, a wave of bows rippled through the assembled crowd. Reina acutely felt the eyes of the nobility upon her, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach due to her status as a noble lady of commoner origins. The Duchess gently squeezed her hand, offering silent reassurance and encouraging her to walk forward with confidence. With effortless grace, the Duchess greeted acquaintances warmly, proudly introducing Reina as her daughter. Though her nerves remained frayed, Reina sternly reminded herself that she couldn't afford to dwell on the judgmental gazes. A nearby lady inquired about a certain countess's son, remarking that he must be around Reina's age. Kilian, visibly annoyed by the turn of conversation, made to interrupt. However, the Duchess calmly reprimanded him with a look, quietly directing him to join his father. Amidst the mingling guests, another lady approached, greeting the Duchess and Kilian and remarking on their evident closeness as mother and son. The Duchess recognized her instantly as Marchioness Maggie. The Marchioness then turned her attention to Reina, acknowledging her as the adopted daughter. Reina offered a nervous greeting, to which Maggie responded with faint, almost condescending praise, calling her rather impressive. Maggie quickly shifted her focus back to Kilian, inquiring solicitously after his well-being. Kilian responded with cool politeness, then courteously asked if the Marchioness's own daughter was in attendance. Maggie gestured forward, introducing her daughter, Esmeralda, who executed a flawless, graceful curtsy. Reina took in Esmeralda's striking appearance, the cascade of straight, raven-black hair, the captivating violet eyes, the elegantly sculpted features, and a jolt went through her. This was her. This was the original novel's heroine. Reina felt a fresh wave of nervousness wash over her as she recalled their previous, albeit brief, encounters. A fierce determination solidified within her. She absolutely had to befriend Esmeralda. She knew, with chilling certainty, that according to the original story's script, she, Reina, was destined to become the villainess who tormented the heroine, only to meet her end at Kilian's hands. To rewrite that dreadful fate, she vowed to shower Esmeralda with nothing but unwavering kindness. The Marchioness commented that the two girls looked similar in age, hoping they would become good friends. Reina saw this as her chance. When the Duchess suggested the two go play, Reina eagerly agreed and invited Esmeralda, who happily accepted. Just as they were about to leave, Reina paused to call out to Kilian, asking if he wanted to join them. Kilian declined, stating he would stay with his mother. Reina speculated that since the original novel hadn't started yet, neither Esmeralda nor Kilian showed any romantic feelings for each other, which made sense given their young age. Reina thought back on Esmeralda, noting she embodied the essence of the novel's heroine. However, something fell off. Esmeralda, shyly, suggested Reina could call her Esme if she felt comfortable. Reina observed that, unlike the bold and cheerful personality Esmeralda had in the original novel, this version seemed overly reserved and quiet, a stark contrast to her established role as the Marquis's beloved and lively daughter. Esme nervously expressed her desire to become close friends with Reina, despite it being their first meeting. Reina found her utterly adorable, becoming slightly flustered herself, and eagerly reciprocated Esme's sentiment. Reina decided to prioritize befriending Esme and learning about her interests. She enthusiastically asked Esme if she enjoyed fencing, horse riding, and archery. Esme replied nervously, admitting she was trying hard but wasn't very skilled. This surprised Reina, as Esme's response was far from what she had expected. Trying to lighten the mood, Reina encouraged her, saying that hobbies were about enjoyment, not skill. Esme hesitantly agreed, but remained uncertain. Reina recalled that in the original novel, both protagonists shared similar hobbies and skills, making them a perfect match. Perhaps Esme's skills just hadn't developed yet. Switching tactics, Reina asked Esme if she liked snacks, confident that no child could resist them. Esme's face lit up with joy as she confessed her love for snacks, delighting Reina, who felt her strategy was working. Esme revealed she was forbidden from eating snacks because they cause weight gain, which she believed hindered her from becoming prettier. This shocked and confused Reina, hearing Esme's self-deprecating thoughts. As Esme sadly repeated her belief, a teacup suddenly slipped from her grasp. Reina grew concerned and called out to her, but Esme's tone shifted abruptly, almost sinisterly, assuring her it was nothing, just an occasional headache. Despite Reina's worry, Esme casually changed the subject, mentioning a delicious dessert shop. She offered to bring Reina something next time, even though she rarely bought things for herself. Sensing something strange in Esme's behavior, Reina decided to act. She told Esme to wait while she fetched some warm soup and food to help her regain her strength. Reina began to suspect something was wrong. She reflected on how different Esme was from the confident, bold heroine she remembered from the original story. She concluded that perhaps this change was because the original story hadn't begun yet. Despite the altered storyline, Reina decided it was crucial to keep a close eye on Esme while pursuing their friendship. Just as Reina focused on preparing a meal for Esme, carefully placing food on her plate, an unexpected force suddenly pushed her, causing her to lose balance and fall. Reina, realizing the danger of the fall, braced herself. She thought that even spending the rest of her life as a palace maid would be preferable to this humiliation. She hit the floor hard, but was relieved to be alive. A girl, who had deliberately pushed her, accused Reina of pushing first, flanked by two other girls. Reina broke into a cold sweat, recognizing this as a typical bullying plot, noticing everyone staring at her, which made her even more uncomfortable. The arrogant girl coldly remarked on Reina's commoner background and accused her of pushing someone without apologizing. Another girl chimed in, pointing out that Miss Ramra's expensive dress was soiled because of Reina, demanding to know how she planned to take responsibility. Reina attempted to turn the tables, standing up and stating calmly that her shoes, specially made for the event, were dirted because the young lady had pushed her. Thus, the responsibility should lie with the other party. The girl denied it, insisting Reina had pushed her, and the two began accusing each other, arguing over who was at fault. Reina sarcastically praised the girl for admitting her mistake and apologizing, which further irritated the arrogant girl. The girl cried out in frustration, denying everything and instead accusing Reina of pushing her. The surrounding crowd began to whisper, recognizing the girl as Miss Ramra and criticizing her for causing such a scene. Realizing she was cornered, Ramra shrank back in embarrassment. Reina noticed Ramra's distress and, starting to feel a twinge of guilt, decided to end the confrontation. She stated that if compensation for the damages was provided, she would forgive everything and leave. Just as Reina tried to walk away, Ramra called out to her and started walking towards her. But she stumbled. Out of concern, Reina moved towards Ramra, only to trip herself. Before she could hit the ground, the prince appeared and caught her, preventing her fall. The prince asked Reina if she was all right. She blushed in shock, surprised by his sudden appearance. Awkwardly and clumsily, she thanked him. Suddenly, Ramra's mother arrived, shouting angrily, demanding to know who had harmed her daughter. Ramra, still crying, pointed at Reina, making her nervous and wishing she could avoid drawing any more attention. Countess Ramra scolded Reina, questioning her upbringing and accusing her of misbehaving. Reina, frustrated and embarrassed by the escalating situation, thought this was becoming unbearable. The prince tried to intervene and explain the situation, but Reina, having reached her limit, decided to handle the matter directly. With a mix of confidence and exasperation, Reina declared that the facts needed clarification. She insisted she was not the one who pushed Miss Ramra, but was, in fact, the victim. She explained how Ramra's actions had caused her to spill her food, dirtying her clothes. Reina then turned her ire towards the countess, emphasizing that her gown had been personally crafted by the Duchess for this celebration and that her dragon leather shoes were also damaged. The mention of dragon leather made the countess flinch. Now nervous, the countess stammered in disbelief, realizing the gravity of the situation. Dragon leather was renowned for its rarity, requiring over 100 years of meticulous care, making it a material beyond the dreams of most common people. Reina mused internally that while dragon leather didn't take 100 years to make, it was still exceedingly rare and the compensation for damaging it would be immense. Though dragon leather couldn't be harmed, even by a knife, it was ironically vulnerable to soup. She informed the Countess that the ducal family would soon send a certificate of content from the workshop, demanding appropriate compensation. Trembling with fear, the Countess tried to muster the courage to deflect blame, asking if Reina had any proof to support her claims. Reina grew increasingly irritated, thinking, "Is she trying to shift the blame onto me now?" Just then, the prince stepped forward, declaring himself an eyewitness. He confidently testified for Reina and revealed his identity, the prince of the Cristea kingdom. Reina was stunned. Cristea was a powerful and friendly nation, frequently mentioned in the original novel. The prince's unwavering support left the countess speechless. Terrified, she turned to her daughter, reprimanding her for her reckless behavior. She demanded Ramara apologize immediately. Ramara, sobbing in frustration, yelled back at her mother before reluctantly offering an apology to Reina, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. Reina noted how the prince had resolved everything with just a word. She shyly thanked him, still feeling flustered. She was beginning to understand how the society of this world truly operated. Just then, Esme arrived, calling out to Reina with concern. Reina asked if Esme was all right and what had happened. Esme admitted she was fine now, but regretted not staying with Reina earlier. Reina reassured her that the matter was settled, all thanks to the prince's timely intervention. However, unbeknownst to Reina, as Prince Heath held her hand, someone was watching her silently from the shadows. He asked her, with a charming smile, if she would consider an engagement with him. Meanwhile, in another part of the venue, Kilian was furious with his mother. The Duchess, maintaining her stern and composed demeanor, insisted that Kilian allow Reina to be with her other friends. Despite his protests, she was determined not to interfere with Reina's potential romances. Earlier, Esme had enthusiastically suggested that she and Reina relax by dancing together. However, Reina was quickly surrounded by a group of boys eager to get close to her. Although Reina considered herself somewhat plain compared to Esmeralda, she privately felt her own looks could be described as petite and cute. Once the commotion subsided, Prince Heath walked straight towards Reina. His gaze was warm, yet commanding, a slight smile playing on his lips. He introduced himself as Heath Cristea, the first prince of the Cristea kingdom. The name resonated with Reina, as he had been mentioned in the original story. Though flustered, Reina managed to maintain her composure, introducing herself as Lady Reina Astyra from the ducal house of Astyra. She thanked him for his earlier intervention, assuming he was just one of Esmeralda's many admirers. Before she could react, Heath leaned down and placed a light peck on her hand. This made Reina blush, and she silently cursed the elaborate etiquette of this unfamiliar world. Heath then asked excitedly if he could interpret her blush as acceptance of his request for a dance. Reina hesitated, but eventually agreed, reminding him that she wasn't very good at dancing. Heath enthusiastically dismissed her concerns, insisting it was perfectly fine. However, as the two began to dance, the atmosphere quickly turned awkward. Reina stumbled, unsure of the steps, while Heath struggled to maintain a light rhythm. Despite their efforts, the elegant flow of a perfect dance seemed to elude them, leaving both somewhat flustered. As Reina stumbled through the dance, her inner thoughts screamed in frustration, convinced this was definitely not fine. Heath, though embarrassed, steadfastly reassured her it was okay, reminding her he had promised to lead. He apologized for the awkwardness, sheepishly suggesting she might have preferred dancing with another lady. However, Heath's tone suddenly shifted. He chuckled lightly, insisting it wasn't a mistake. In a sincere tone, he confessed that he specifically wanted to dance with Reina because he found her interesting. The confession made Reina blush furiously, her mind racing, classifying him as the type of man destined to leave a trail of broken hearts. Before she could respond, Heath leaned in slightly, lowering his voice to add, "And I know this lady's secret." Reina's heart skipped a beat, her mind whirling. What secret? Does he really know something about me? She thought nervously. Heath continued, explaining that the Cristea royal family possessed a dragonhide vest, an heirloom renowned for its unparalleled durability. It could withstand anything, be it arrows, monster attacks, or even viscous soup. He smiled slyly. He deduced that her dragon leather shoes must possess the same rare quality. Reina struggled to compose herself, offering him a strange smile. With a hint of sarcasm, she responded, complimenting his impressive ability to deceive others. while remarking that his appreciation for such falsehoods was rather peculiar. Heath expressed his admiration for Reina's smooth, lying skills and unexpectedly asked if she would be willing to enter into an engagement with him. Shocked, Reina recalled receiving 2 marriage proposals within days, something she had never experienced in her previous life. Feeling overwhelmed, she withdrew her hand, questioning the suddenness of the engagement proposal. Heath clarified that he meant a contractual engagement, not an actual marriage. He reminded her that he was the first prince of the Christia kingdom. Reina realized he wasn't the crown prince and understood his intentions. Heath's mother, the deposed queen, made the succession uncertain between him and the second prince, born to the new queen. To solidify his position, Heath sought an alliance with the powerful ducal house of Astoria. Heath proposed supporting Reina's social activities in exchange for the contractual engagement, highlighting that the Astoria family, despite its power, had a weak presence in social circles. He offered to fill that gap for her and even meet any condition she might set. Reina hesitated, but finally stated her condition: to receive monthly cash payments in her name, explaining it was crucial for her future independence. Heath was surprised, but agreed without hesitation, making Reina feel slightly guilty. She admitted uncertainty about how she could help him, but Heath reassured her they would be perfect partners. Ultimately, after considering the opportunity, Reina agreed to the engagement by shaking his hand. Just as Heath and Reina sealed their agreement, Kilian's voice interrupted them, calling for his sister. Reina flinched, turning anxiously, only to see her younger brother. Realization dawned, and panic seized her. Thoughts raced through her mind about how Kilian might react. She had jokingly promised to marry him, and now this engagement might make him hate her again. Kilian, emotional and teary-eyed, asked if she was really getting engaged. His reaction surprised Reina, as she hadn't expected him to be so heartbroken. As he turned away sadly, she wanted to approach him, but Heath tried to stop her. Determined, Reina told Heath to wait and followed her brother to the balcony. Kilian sobbed, reminding her of her promise to marry him. Sweating with anxiety, Reina tried to console him, explaining it was just an engagement with Heath, not a marriage. Even as she said it, she knew it sounded like a weak excuse. Deep down, she felt guilty, but reminded herself this engagement was a crucial step towards her independence. She silently apologized to her brother. Kilian wiped his tears and asked if an engagement was truly different from marriage. Reina tried to calm him, explaining that an engagement was merely a promise to marry and could be broken. She assured him this engagement was important to her, though she couldn't explain the full details. Just then, Kilian, still uncertain, asked if she was telling the truth this time. Reina confirmed sincerely that she was. Kilian, overhearing their conversation, rushed over happily and hugged Reina, relieved by her words. Reina felt a wave of relief too, thanking Kilian, but as she looked at him, she noticed he seemed lost in thought. Kilian, though outwardly calm, was seriously processing the situation internally. He couldn't believe Reina's sudden change, especially after she had promised to marry him just days ago. Unsure what to believe, he realized empty promises wouldn't be enough to keep her by his side. Resolute, he began to contemplate how to ensure she remained in his life, not just relying on promises. Today was Ramira's engagement day. The Duchess noticed Reina's discomfort and asked if she was feeling unwell. Reina reassured her that she was fine. She reflected on the 9 years she had lived as Reina and her current age of 16. During this time, a lingering issue had weighed on her mind, and it was now time to address it. Reina recalled a past conversation with her father, the Duke, who had expressed concern about her age, deeming her too young for engagement. This had been a persistent obstacle for her. Over the years, she had grown increasingly worried that Heath might tire of waiting and cancel their contract. The Duchess asked Reina if she was bothered by Countess Ramira's daughter, the girl who often troubled her at gatherings. She angrily offered to handle the situation, but Reina calmly declined, assuring her everything was all right. Just as Reina was about to leave, Kilian called out to her, reminding her to return later. Reina observed how much Kilian had matured. No longer the little child who used to follow her around and throw tantrums. She sometimes missed that younger, less composed version of him. At the engagement celebration, Lady Ramira and her friends congratulated Lady Ramira on her engagement. Esme also offered her congratulations. Ramira thanked everyone and greeted Lady Reina, asking if there was still no news regarding her own engagement. Reina remembered Lady Ramira, who, due to her family's declining fortune, had quickly arranged a marriage with a wealthy baron. This daughter of Countess Ramara had been harassing Reina for the past 9 years. Lady Ramara expressed concern that Reina's engagement was dragging on for too long, which irritated Reina. She briefly considered following the Duchess's advice to physically discipline her, but ultimately responded with just a sly remark about how much Duke Astria cherished her, subtly asserting her own standing. Lady Ramara flinched slightly at the response. Undeterred, she pointed at Reina's bracelet, criticizing its overly extravagant appearance. Reina apologized and suggested putting it away safely during the ceremony. Lady Ramara agreed, proposing to store the bracelet in her drawing room until the event concluded. In her own room, Ramara admired the jewelry taken from Reina, feeling it suited her better. She recalled her dreams of becoming a crown princess or a duchess, blaming others for her failures. Reina had become the target of her jealousy. Ramara gloated as she wore the jewelry, savoring the moment. However, her satisfaction was cut short when Kilian walked in, startling her. He complimented the jewelry, leaving Ramara flustered, shocked that the prince was speaking to her. Kilian expressed regret upon hearing about Lady Ramara's engagement, surprising her. Ramara blushed, mentioning she had admired him for a long time, and wished things could have been different, implying that perhaps something might have happened if he had waited. Kilian soothed her, calming her down, and suggested she show everyone their token of love, the bracelet, during the engagement ceremony. Ramara's eyes filled with tears, moved by his words. When Kilian returned, Reina noticed his pale complexion and asked if he was all right. He assured her he was fine. Reina marveled at how much he had grown, becoming more handsome, realizing he would soon become the male lead of the original story. Lady Ramara gave a speech at the engagement ceremony, thanking the guests and celebrating budding love. However, her speech sounded insincere, and she kept glancing towards Reina and Kilian, making both uncomfortable. Reina noticed Ramara wearing her bracelet and was shocked, bewildered by her actions and her fiancé's embarrassment. Meanwhile, Kilian looked distressed as Ramara announced that the engaged couple would light the candles together, marking the end of the ceremony. Just as Ramara and her fiancé lit the engagement candles, all the candles unexpectedly burst into flames. Panic ensued amidst the chaos. The hand on which Ramara wore Reina's bracelet caught fire. She screamed for help, and Reina quickly threw water on her. Drenched from the effort to extinguish the flames, Ramara furiously pointed at Reina, blaming her for the incident and shouting that she must have tampered with the bracelet to make it catch fire. Esme, noticing the bracelet on Ramara's hand, grabbed her wrist, exclaiming that it belonged to the princess. The surrounding crowd murmured, realizing it was indeed Reina's bracelet. Reina sharply reminded Ramara of her promise to take good care of it, adding that it was far too ostentatious for an engagement ceremony. Shocked, Ramara tried to deflect, turning to Kilian for support, demanding he speak up for her. She reminded him that he was the one who told her to wear the bracelet. But Kilian, his expression stern, denied knowing what she was talking about. Esme, growing impatient with Ramara, pointed out that everyone had witnessed how Ramara took the bracelet from Reina, emphasizing how unreasonable her actions were. Trembling with shame and fear, Ramara burst into tears and hurried away. Reina reflected on the nature of nobility, observing how they struggled to navigate a world dominated by power and self-interest. The onlookers mocked Ramara's behavior. Some questioned how Countess Ramara could have raised her daughter so poorly, while others expressed curiosity about her family secrets. Reina felt conflicted, contemplating the essence of this society. People feigned friendliness but turned against each other swiftly when it suited their interests. She admitted that while she held no grudge against Lady Ramara, she only wished the girl would stop causing trouble. Yet, Reina wondered if she had been too harsh. Kilian noticed Reina's sadness, sensing she might be blaming herself, and understood how much she must have endured, often deceived by the goodwill of others. He comforted her, saying, "Let's go, sister." As they walked outside, Reina thanked Kilian for his help. He replied, "Of course. We're family. It's only natural to help each other." However, Reina sensed a subtle shift in Kilian's demeanor. As time passed, he had become more polite and mature, treating her with more distance than before. Although she understood this was part of growing up, she couldn't shake the feeling that he now drew a line between them, no longer showing the same affection as when they were younger. Reina wondered how Kilian had convinced Lady Ramara to wear her bracelet. Kilian confessed it had been difficult for him, as he wasn't skilled at lying. Reina found this amusing, pointing out he still managed to lie smoothly, and laughed, saying it was quite remarkable. Kilian smiled back, suggesting Reina should praise him a little, as it had been both hard and tiring. Reina smiled, thinking he still seemed like a child sometimes, and suggested they go home and eat something delicious together. Kilian agreed. Later that evening, Reina wrote in her diary that she was doing well and would soon speak with the Duke again about their engagement. She sighed, noting that the beginning of the original novel was approaching, and everyone except her was getting engaged. Things with Kilian were becoming increasingly complicated, and she felt frustrated by the lack of progress on her plans for independence. She concluded, feeling overwhelmed, that she should go out for a walk. Just as Reina stepped out for her stroll, Kilian noticed her and seized the opportunity to slip into her room. There, he found the letter she had written earlier. He read it, thinking that, just as expected, Reina's letters always seemed dry, despite her determination to overcome difficulties. He looked out the window, saw Reina walking, and thought her insomnia seemed to be worsening. He mused that the engagement was merely a formality. He could break it off any time. Reina emerged from her bath, feeling refreshed and ready for bed. But just as she was about to sleep, she heard a knock. Opening the door, she found Kilian standing there. He asked if she could lull him to sleep. This left Reina utterly stunned. Kilian mentioned that she seemed to be sleeping poorly lately, so he suggested he could help her fall asleep too. Both bewildered and flustered, Reina asked him how old he was, protesting that it was unreasonable for him to make such a request. Kilian looked sullen, explaining he'd had a nightmare, and then asked if Reina would truly turn away her only younger brother at a time like this. Reina felt a flicker of annoyance, thinking Kilian's usual act-cute routine wouldn't work forever, but still unwilling to be completely heartless, she agreed to let him sleep beside her. Reina felt disappointed in herself. She reflected on how she had lost again, thinking sarcastically that Kilian hadn't matured after all. Then Kilian asked if she was still worried about not being engaged yet. He implied this was the reason for her sleeplessness. Reina, caught somewhat off guard, nervously admitted that seeing everyone else get engaged while her own betrothal kept being postponed did bother her a little. She couldn't fathom why Kilian, who used to be very sensitive about the topic of engagement, would suddenly bring it up now. Kilian surprised Reina by offering to help her by speaking to their father about her marriage. She did understand why he was suddenly offering assistance, but felt inwardly grateful, as it might mean the Duke would finally approve her engagement. However, Kilian added that she must do something for him in return. When she came of age, she had to leave the duchy. Reina was shocked but agreed nonetheless, thinking it didn't matter since she planned to leave anyway and was destined to die regardless. She smiled and accepted the deal, saying she would do as he asked if he helped her get engaged. Later, as they lay on opposite sides of the bed, Kilian asked if, by then, they would no longer be family. Overwhelmed by emotion, Reina wept silently, unsure why she felt so sad when everything was proceeding according to her plan. Reina visited the Duke in his office, where he reminisced about how quickly she had grown, remembering her as a child. He then approved her marriage. Reina beamed with happiness and thanked him. The Duke assured her that, regardless of circumstances, there would always be a place for her in the duchy should she ever need to return. Filled with gratitude and emotion, Reina thanked him again. Later, Esmeralda congratulated Reina on her engagement. She expressed relief that Reina had finally overcome all her challenges. Reina thanked Esme warmly, and Esme congratulated her in return, sharing in her joy. Reina discussed her marriage to the prince with the Marchioness Mazin, who expressed hope that Esmeralda might also find someone as wonderful as Reina's match. Reina chuckled lightly, confident that Esmeralda would find an even better man. She also thought of the novel's male lead. Then Reina noticed Kilian hadn't been seen for several days and was surprised by his absence from the engagement ceremony preparations. Margine pointed out Kilian's absence, remarking how disappointing it was that he couldn't be present for his sister's important event. Reina brushed it off, mentioning Kilian had been busy and seemed somewhat distant, perhaps no longer seeing her as a sister. At the engagement ceremony, Heath expressed his devotion to Reina, promising to strive earnestly for her sake and asking for her trust. Reina feeling grateful, assured him he had already done so much for her, especially in resolving the matter of her independence, leaving her only needing to fulfill the role of his fiancée. Heath noticed what seemed like tears in Reina's eyes. He asked if she was all right. Reina laughed it off, claiming it was just happiness from finally being engaged. After the ceremony, she reflected that she couldn't recall the details, like the dress, the food, or the gifts, realizing the significance of the moment itself had overshadowed everything else. One evening, as Heath was closing a door, he was startled to see Kilian standing there. Heath asked him what he was doing in someone else's room without permission. Kilian remarked that Heath's room was nice and mentioned their mother's fondness for him, suggesting Heath must be pleased. Heath asked what Kilian wanted to say, and Kilian questioned whether Heath was using Reina for political purposes. He pointed out that their relationship didn't seem based on love, especially since they had barely met after their first encounter 9 years ago. Kilian asserted that if Heath knew about Reina's status as a princess, then their relationship wasn't simple. Heath admitted there was initially a contractual element, but now his feelings for Reina were genuine, and he was more loyal to her than anyone else. He assured Kilian that although Reina held animosity towards him, she hadn't given up on him, so he wouldn't give up on her either. Heath then departed, demonstrating his resolve. Kilian was left contemplating his next move. He felt uncertain. Meanwhile, Reina was in her room, visibly upset, pouting. She grumbled about Kilian not attending her engagement ceremony, wondering inwardly if she was overreacting. She pondered whether she had reason to be so angry, but couldn't suppress her inner displeasure. She tried to dismiss the thoughts, telling herself to stop thinking about it, but the frustration lingered. Just then, Kilian entered the room, startling Reina with his sudden appearance. She nervously wondered if he had overheard her complaints. Kilian then apologized for missing the engagement ceremony, explaining that he couldn't make it in time. Reina grew anxious, convinced Kilian must have heard everything, and felt irritated. She tried to mask her discomfort, insisting the engagement ceremony was perfect even without him. Kilian disagreed, and Reina nervously changed the subject, claiming she was tired and needed sleep, quickly urging him to leave. But Kilian mentioned he had brought a gift to apologize, prepared with something shiny he thought she would like. Reina forced a smile and reluctantly agreed to accept it. She hesitated, but when she opened her eyes, she found herself held in Kilian's arms, outdoors beside a small lake. Reina was stunned by the beautiful scenery, and Kilian asked if she liked it. He admitted it was different from the shiny things she usually liked, but hoped she would appreciate this too. Reina replied that it was beautiful. Reina, smiling happily, told Kilian it was wonderful. However, Kilian confessed he wasn't truly sorry for missing the ceremony, only regretful that he couldn't dance with her. He asked to dance with her now, and she agreed, granting him special permission. As they danced, Reina thought to herself that her younger brother, despite his occasionally suspicious behavior, was both considerate and lovely to her. Would he eventually become the cruel Kilian from the original novel? Kilian then asked if he had made things difficult for her when they were children. Reina smiled mischievously, teasing that he was cute, but also admitting that perhaps he had been a bit much. Kilian asked if he was still cute now, and Reina, thinking of the future, giggled and said he was handsome now. Kilian joked that he wasn't cool enough yet, and Reina playfully retorted that he was far from cool. Reina reflected on the changes she might have caused to the original story since she arrived here. Kilian commented that things change over time, including both of their lives. Reina wondered if she could alter Kilian's future, even just a little. He interrupted her thoughts, reminding her of her promise to be independent. He sternly insisted that she keep her word. Afterwards, Reina's belongings were being loaded onto a carriage. Her maid, Eliza, mentioned they might need at least 2 more carriages. Reina asked in surprise if Eliza intended to bring the entire household to the academy. Eliza then suggested moving some more furniture from her own room if necessary, but Reina quickly refused. The Duke remarked that Reina had chosen a good maid. The Duchess remarked that Eliza deserved a raise, a situation Reina found distressing. Noticing Reina's apprehension about the academy, the Duchess reassured her, saying it was perfectly fine if she chose not to go, emphasizing their belief in letting children play rather than adhering to rigid noble education. Reina reflected on the Duke and Duchess's unique educational philosophy, resolving to dote on her own daughter someday and support her financially. She had learned many skills from this family, and despite her initial worries, Reina felt determined she could handle the situation. The Duke supported her decision to attend the academy, but told her she could return anytime if she found it boring. Reina agreed to leave, and her family saw her off with warm farewells. The Duchess urged Reina to visit often on weekends and school holidays, and Reina, in high spirits, smiled and promised she would. At the academy, students buzzed with excitement over the arrival of Princess Reina Astra. They remarked on the extravagant sight of 5 carriages and speculated about her background, with some scoffing that she was a commoner, despite her royal name. Eliza bristled at the gossip, seething with anger. Reina, feeling awkward, tried to calm Eliza down with a smile, telling her not to be so childish. Eliza struggled to contain her frustration, but Reina dismissed it as immature behavior. When Reina arrived at the academy proper, a nervous headmaster Greels greeted her. He hastily explained that he had received multiple threatening letters from the Duke, insisting Reina be treated well. He assured her the academy was fully prepared for her arrival, mentioning her dormitory was a luxurious suite, furnished by master artisans, and her uniform crafted from the finest silk, embroidered with her personal colors. Reina, startled and overwhelmed by the excessive attention, quickly cut him off, insisting she didn't need any of it. Eliza, acting as the Duke's representative, took a firm stance with the headmaster, further asserting her authority. This created a tense atmosphere, with some students remarking on what they saw as an abuse of power, gossiping about how Reina, the commoner, received such treatment. Reina felt distressed by the situation, reflecting that Eliza might become even more imperious than the original Reina had been. Exhausted after a long day of conflict between Eliza and the headmaster, Reina collapsed on her bed. She fell asleep quickly, unaware that the next day would bring even more challenges. Reina awoke with a start to find Kilian in the bed right beside her. She demanded to know how he got there, wondering if it was a dream, as she had never expected to see him at the academy. Kilian calmly reassured her it wasn't a dream. Reina shrieked in surprise, asking why he was here, especially since she hadn't seen him since the engagement ceremony. Kilian apologized, explaining he feared for his life if his mother caught him after missing his sister's engagement ceremony, so he hadn't been home in years. Reina, still incredulous, asked if he truly hadn't been home for that long. Kilian casually revealed he'd been essentially homeless since the engagement, shocking Reina. She urged him to go home, saying their mother would be worried. Kilian remarked he'd never seen their mother run so fast. Reina recalled recently noticing their mother buying many weapons, suspecting it was for Kilian's training. Kilian then asked if he could stay with her for a while, throwing Reina into a complete panic. Kilian suggested they could share the room and the bed, as it was large enough, which flustered Reina even more. He mentioned how, when they were children, she would sometimes sleep in his room. This embarrassed Reina, who protested that they were adults now, making it uncomfortable and entirely different from their childhood. After a brief silence, Kilian conceded there was nothing they could do and decided he would find an empty classroom instead. Reina was surprised he accepted the situation so readily. He assured her he would still visit often. As Kilian left the room, he blushed, embarrassed by the entire exchange. Reina began her first day at the academy, feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. Her friend Esmeralda approached, expressing her delight at seeing Reina at the academy. Esme noticed the book Reina was carrying, remarking on her enthusiasm for studying. Reina tried to downplay it, stating her determination to show her full potential at the academy. Class began. Miss Potts introduced herself and announced a simple test for the first day. Reina was shocked and distressed at the prospect of an immediate test. Miss Potts explained she would call on each student to answer a question, making Reina nervous about her performance. Reina felt anxious about a history test, knowing next to nothing about the subject. She recalled how, during her childhood, the Duchess would discard history and knowledge books, encouraging her to read romance novels instead. Reina worried about how she would answer. Miss Potts asked a simple question. In what year was the empire founded? Reina realized it was a basic question, but only remembered the founding year of the Joseon dynasty, answering 92. The classroom fell silent. Miss Potts was stunned, Rammer snickered, and even Esme looked surprised by Reina's answer. Miss Potts shrieked, attempting to defend Reina's answer, explaining that while the empire was founded in 1786, the year 1392 was significant due to a historical event. Rammer challenged this, pointing out that 1392 predated the empire's founding. Miss Potts nervously acknowledged Rammer's sharp observation, but tried to salvage the situation by claiming 1392 was related to the first emperor, without whom the empire wouldn't exist. Ramara agreed sarcastically, implying Reina must have seen a vision. Reina, deeply embarrassed, wished she could just go home. Madame Janov addressed the students, emphasizing the importance of nobility and announcing preparations for an upcoming charity party. She asked if anyone wished to volunteer as team leader. Reina raised her hand, and Madame Janov acknowledged her. The other girls whispered amongst themselves, noting Reina wasn't particularly interested in parties, but observing that money was crucial for hosting one. They mentioned how Reina had arrived the previous day with 5 carriages, commenting that no young lady could match her wealth. Reina, annoyed, recalled it was Eliza who had demanded the 5 carriages. She felt pressured to build her influence, to ensure Heath became the crown prince. She saw this charity event as a vital step. Madame Janov confirmed Reina as the first volunteer and asked if there were any others. Ramara raised her hand, promising a generous investment to ensure the party's success. Reina felt distressed, noting Ramara remained wealthy despite having settled her family's debts through marriage. Madame Janov confirmed that Reina and Ramara would jointly manage the charity party, expressing anticipation for a successful event. That evening, Kilian sat comfortably in Reina's room, casually asking what was bothering her. Reina, irritated, retorted sarcastically, asking if this was his room now. She felt guilty about letting her younger brother stay, but had ultimately agreed. She told him to go home, but Kilian insisted on staying by her side, saying he wanted to help her with her troubles. Reina muttered that she couldn't figure out what he was thinking, but Kilian didn't quite catch it. They both reminisced about the past, and Reina lamented that even though a rift had grown between them, in his memory, she was still his older sister. Noticing Reina's troubled expression, Kilian asked what was bothering her. With mixed feelings, Reina admitted she had become the team leader for the charity party and now had to select her members. She worried about not choosing the right people and about being unable to recruit those she wanted. Kilian, eager to help, asked if there was anything he could do. Reina initially expressed skepticism, wondering how he could possibly assist. Kilian reassured her, saying he would do anything for her. Just then, Madame Janov announced that team members would be selected via rock, paper, scissors to ensure the process was completely fair. The girls eagerly prepared for the game, each confident in her chances. As the competition began, Reina won the first round. Her excitement grew, feeling a sense of accomplishment and anticipation for what was to come. Having won the first round, Reina chose the daughter of Marquis Aegean, much to the girls' delight. However, Ramara was visibly annoyed, commenting that she couldn't understand Reina's choice. Despite her irritation, the selection continued with the next round of rock, paper, scissors. Ramara won, and with a triumphant smile, she chose the daughter of Count Andover. The choice surprised the girl herself, but Reina quickly understood the reasoning behind it. Rumor had it that Count Andover's family had recently come into wealth, and Ramara had chosen her for financial benefit rather than friendship. Ramara's decision reaffirmed her reputation for being materialistic, and Reina remarked internally that it was just like her. Reina watched as Count Andover's daughter declared she had plans, feeling disdainful that she had been chosen for her money. The game of rock, paper, scissors continued, and Ramara won again. She offered Reina a disingenuous apology, but Reina acted indifferent, smiling and congratulating her, which only annoyed Ramara further. Reina reflected on her strategy. She had intentionally won the first round to select the person she wanted, then deliberately lost the subsequent rounds. Reina knew Ramara would prioritize girls from wealthy families, so her plan required young ladies from smaller houses or rural areas. Winning too many rounds and selecting weaker candidates might arouse suspicion, so losing was part of her plan. Earlier, Reina had asked Kilian who Ramara would choose. To her shock, Kilian revealed he could read minds, something Reina hadn't known before. Reina was stunned, thinking Kilian might have been reading her inner thoughts all along, only for him to joke that he was just kidding. Annoyed by his teasing, Reina questioned how he knew so much. Kilian casually replied that he just knew, leaving Reina to ponder his keen insight, which allowed him to predict Lady Ramara's choices based on subtle movements. In the present moment, Ramara was about to choose her final team member. Reina predicted it would be Ramara's close friend, Lady Douglas, but was shocked when Ramara chose the daughter of Count Marana instead. Even Count Marana's daughter was taken aback by the selection, but Ramara confidently expressed her desire to work with her. Reina was puzzled by Ramara's unexpected choice of Lady Marana over her closest friend. Reina met with her team members, expressing enthusiasm for planning the party together and promising to do her best to ensure its success. She informed them that the real preparations would begin the next day, and arranged a meeting after school at the main gate. Afterwards, Ramira secretly met with her close friend Lady Douglas, who was part of Reina's team. Ramira stressed the importance of ensuring the charity party's success, and emphasized that although Lady Marina might seem somewhat eccentric, her mother was a prominent socialite. As Lady Douglas hesitated, Ramira assured her that assigning her to another group was done with good intentions. She requested Lady Douglas act as a spy, claiming it was necessary to prevent commoners from influencing the event. Ramira promised that if she successfully gathered information about the commoners' plans, she would introduce her to suitable gentlemen from her fiancé's side. Lady Douglas flushed with excitement. Flattered and delighted by Ramira's promise of introductions, she enthusiastically agreed to do her utmost for the assigned task, unaware that Kilian was secretly observing their conversation. Meanwhile, Reina gathered her team members, leading them onto a carriage to begin their journey. The road was rough and uneven, making the girls nervous and anxious about their destination. Some worried if they were heading the right way, but Reina calmly reassured them, telling them to relax. Lady Douglas hesitantly asked if they were still preparing for the party, but Reina kept the destination secret, merely stating they would understand upon arrival. After a bumpy ride, the carriage finally halted, and Reina excitedly instructed everyone to disembark quickly. As everyone stepped down, Esme and Lady Douglas were shocked to realize where they were. Esme guessed nervously, while Lady Douglas cried out in surprise, recognizing the place as St. Margaret's house. With a hint of triumph, Reina revealed that St. Margaret's house, this orphanage, would be the venue for their charity party. Reina's group enthusiastically began teaching the orphanage children. One member helped a little girl adjust her pen grip, ensuring she was comfortable, while another patiently taught a boy to write his name. The joyful atmosphere reflected the group's excitement, except for Lady Douglas, who appeared visibly irritated by Reina's actions. Unable to contain herself, Lady Douglas confronted Reina in frustration, demanding to know what exactly she was planning. Reina responded enthusiastically, explaining that their charity event embodied the principle of noblesse oblige. She elaborated that the theme of their event was promoting commoner education, and she herself intended to serve as a temporary teacher for the children. Just as Reina was passionately sharing her vision, an orphan approached Lady Douglas, seeking help with writing. However, Lady Douglas reacted rudely, swatting the child's hand away and scolding them for touching her. The child, terrified, recoiled in fear. Reina witnessed this harsh behavior and became furious, yelling at Lady Douglas with palpable anger in her voice. Seething, Reina grabbed Lady Douglas's hand, loudly declaring she was unfit to be a teacher and demanding she leave immediately. Lady Douglas, with an air of arrogance, retorted defiantly, agreeing that it was indeed impossible for her to teach these beggars. Without hesitation, Reina dragged Lady Douglas out of the room and forcefully ejected her, leaving her stunned. Shocked and furious, Lady Douglas yelled in disbelief, questioning Reina's actions. Reina remained firm, telling Lady Douglas she could either wait in the carriage or stand outside, but forbade her from re-entering the classroom. Dumbfounded and speechless, Lady Douglas could only watch as Reina slammed the door shut in front of her. Reina approached the little orphan girl and apologized sincerely. The girl smiled, reassured her it was all right, and mentioned she often heard people call her dirty. Hearing this, Reina felt a pang of guilt and began to tremble. To comfort the child, she concocted a story, claiming the rude teacher hadn't bathed in months. The girl, both shocked and confused, asked how that could be possible since the teacher didn't look dirty. Reina explained that the teacher used perfume to mask the odor, but it became noticeable if one got too close. She added that she had sent the teacher away out of concern the girl might smell the odor. When the girl curiously asked why the teacher didn't bathe, Reina, feeling a bit flustered, quickly spun another tale, explaining that the teacher had once fallen into water and developed a profound fear of it ever since, avoiding it entirely. After hearing Reina's fabricated story, the girl now understood, feeling reassured and comforted. The orphan girl felt sorry for the teacher. Later, Reina and her team returned to the academy. The girls were elated, expressing how much they enjoyed the experience. They shared snippets of their day, with one mentioning a student who scolded her for not listening. But she was grateful that the scolding seemed genuine. Reina reflected silently, feeling satisfied as everyone had exceeded her expectations. She noted that perhaps her own actions stemmed from emulating her teacher, though she glanced at Lady Douglas, who clearly did not share the same enthusiasm. Lady Douglas commented irritably and dismissively about the children, questioning what was so good about them. Reina thanked everyone for their hard work and distributed gifts as tokens of appreciation. The girls were delighted, marveling at the beauty of the brooches and expressing surprise at the diamond rings. Witnessing this, Lady Douglas began to sweat nervously, seeing the valuable gifts Reina gave to the others. The girl hesitated to accept the gift, feeling it was too precious, but Reina encouraged her, saying it was a reward for her efforts. Reina then informed everyone they would meet again next week at the daycare center. As they returned to the academy, Lady Douglas stared at Reina with a mischievous expression. This unsettled Reina, making her suspect she was plotting something. Eliza asked if they should follow Lady Douglas, but Reina dismissed the idea, thinking it pointless to trail her. Later, Lady Douglas informed Ramara about Reina's plans involving the daycare center. Ramara scoffed at the idea, sneering at the thought of rehearsals being held there. She expressed disbelief at such a plan and ordered Lady Douglas to cause trouble next time, ensuring Reina's group wouldn't be allowed back into the daycare center. Ramara confidently declared that if something like today happened again, she would overturn tables and ruin Reina's plans. She believed this would satisfy Lady Douglas, who reluctantly agreed, recalling the expensive gifts Reina had given everyone but her. Meanwhile, Eliza stood guard outside Reina's room. When she heard someone trying to enter, she prepared to attack with a dagger, but stopped upon recognizing Kilian. Flustered, she asked why the prince was in the princess's room, implying he looked like he was taking advantage of Reina's absence. Kilian chuckled reassuringly, explaining Reina had permitted him entry. He joked about being homeless, but reminded Eliza he was the heir to the family she served. Kilian then changed the subject, expressing concern that some noble ladies were trying to cause trouble for his sister. Eliza reacted angrily to the news that noble ladies were bothering Reina, declaring she would take immediate action. Kilian, weary and slightly annoyed, calmly told her his sister wouldn't approve of such drastic measures. Eliza accepted this, but still vowed to handle the situation in her own way. Later, Reina and her team headed to the orphanage again, with Eliza determined to accompany her. Reina, somewhat embarrassed, tried to wave off Eliza's presence, suggesting she didn't need to follow her. However, Eliza insisted on protecting her, even expressing disappointment for not being present initially. Reina reluctantly accepted Eliza's company and suggested she could help teach the children at the orphanage. Eliza eagerly agreed, though her idea of teaching involved rather unsettling skills like breaking and resetting bones and paralyzing someone with 2 fingers. Her intense enthusiasm made the other girls anxious, and Reina agonized inwardly, silently praying for Eliza to behave. As Reina and her team arrived at the orphanage, a young orphan girl, Anna, approached Lady Douglas, holding a water bottle. She attempted to hand the bottle to Lady Douglas, who, taken aback, was about to shout at Anna. Reina, noticing the situation, reacted quickly, advising Anna not to be afraid. Eliza, observing Lady Douglas's rising anger, swiftly covered her mouth with her hand to prevent a confrontation. Reina tried to smooth things over, commenting that the water bottle was lovely and suggesting it might help Lady Douglas overcome her fear of water. Lady Douglas, frustrated, scoffed at the gift, calling it cheap. Reina attempted to salvage the moment, insisting Lady Douglas appreciated the gift and was very grateful. However, Anna innocently added that she had overheard yesterday how Lady Douglas hadn't bathed in months due to her fear of water, which made her feel sad. Lady Douglas, infuriated by Anna's comment about not bathing for months, reacted angrily, but Reina quickly covered for her by praising Anna as the first person to show concern for Lady Douglas. Anna, feeling sympathetic towards Lady Douglas, expressed her sadness that the lady had no friends. Lady Douglas, still annoyed, tried to mask her discomfort. Undeterred, Anna took Lady Douglas's hand, assuring her she would be her friend. From now on, she enthusiastically offered Lady Douglas water, invited her to water the flowers in the garden, and even gave her the juice she had saved. Lady Douglas was unexpectedly moved and accepted the offers with feigned excitement. However, her apparent acceptance of Anna's newfound kindness seemed influenced more by Eliza's growing displeasure than genuine feeling. Trembling slightly out of fear of Eliza, Lady Douglas thanked Anna for her kindness, but insisted it was time to leave. Anna, slightly disappointed but still cheerful, said she had fun and assured Lady Douglas that even if she didn't bathe for 100 years, she would still be her friend, encouraging her to visit again. Lady Douglas, both frustrated and embarrassed, denied having any odor and, seeing Reina smiling and seemingly impressed, awkwardly agreed to visit again next week. Reina praised her and offered a gift. However, Lady Douglas dismissively ignored her, replying only with a curt, "We'll see." Elsewhere, Esme nervously faced her mother's fury in her room. Her mother sternly demanded an explanation as to why Esme wasn't hosting the charity party. Esme apologized fearfully, but her mother grew angrier. She berated Esme for allowing Lady Ramra to snatch the position, deeming it unforgivable, especially at a crucial time when Esme should be solidifying her social standing. Esme tried to defend herself, saying she thought it better to assist the princess closely, but her mother harshly reminded her not to become overly invested in her friendship with the princess, warning that Esme didn't understand the gravity of the situation. Esme's mother roughly grabbed her face, questioning if the prince had ever replied to her letters. She scolded Esme for relying on an incomplete spell, stressing that a basic level of attraction was necessary for it to work properly. Her mother insisted that at the upcoming charity party, Esme must impress the Duke and Duchess and become the star of the event. Esme reluctantly agreed. Meanwhile, Esme and the other girls were surprised by Reina's announcement. Reina excitedly explained that the charity party would serve as a venue for the children to showcase their talents. As the girls expressed their shock, Reina elaborated that the event would help the children gain new experiences and confidence, while also raising funds to build a school for them. She added that while the current lessons were temporary, having a proper school would be much better for the children. Reina assured them that no child unwilling to perform would be forced onto the stage. The orphans excitedly declared they would perform, each eager to do well. Reina noticed Anna standing close to Lady Douglas and asked if she would perform too. Anna nervously expressed doubt about her ability to do the presentation well. Reina tried to encourage her, but to her surprise, Lady Douglas intervened, cheering Anna on and telling her she could do it. This astonished Reina, while Anna excitedly asked if it was really true. Lady Douglas reassured her, asking who else it could be, if not Anna. Anna eagerly declared that she would definitely do the presentation. The orphanage director approached to express her gratitude to Lady Douglas. She conveyed her appreciation for the care Lady Douglas had shown Anna. The director revealed that Anna had experienced something similar in her past. After losing her parents, Anna had been neglected and bullied by relatives for being perceived as dirty. Even after arriving at the orphanage, she had a compulsive need for cleanliness. However, during her time with Lady Douglas, Anna seemed to have overcome her trauma. The director thanked Lady Douglas for her help. Lady Douglas, feeling emotional, told her not to mention it. On the day of a charity party, Ramara approached Lady Douglas with a sly smile. She inquired whether that commoner girl, Anna, would be participating. She then pointedly reminded Lady Douglas of her family's precarious financial situation, offering assistance. Ramara claimed they should support each other in difficult times. Ramara promised to put in a good word with her father if Lady Douglas agreed to help with her plan. Then she revealed her scheme. Her maid would steal the Marchioness's necklace. Lady Douglas's role was to discreetly slip the necklace into Anna's pocket during her presentation. Lady Douglas was instructed to cut Anna's pocket with a knife, causing the necklace to fall out in front of everyone. The girls admired Princess Reina's gown, identifying it as Miss Dao's latest haute couture creation. They praised Estira's elegance, marveling at how the once gloomy orphanage had transformed into such an impressive venue, especially with so many distinguished guests present. Reina introduced herself to King Chrysia, Heath's father, and thanked him for attending. The king acknowledged her efforts in organizing the party, remarking that its focus on education was commendable. Feeling nervous, Reina mentioned that the idea for the party had come from Heath. She emphasized Heath's keen interest in educational projects and how his ideas aligned with the king's. Heath interjected, clarifying that the party was entirely Princess Reina's planning, which impressed the king, who acknowledged her hard work. Reina blushed shyly, admitting she had simply done her best. The king stated he would be watching the event closely, much to Reina's relief. Heath teased Reina, noting her excitement. Reina explained how she had tailored the party based on the king's interest in education. She revealed her goal was to ensure the event succeeded as her first official appearance as Heath's fiancée, while also making Heath look good. Heath realized that was why she had been so busy lately. Reina began to reflect on whether she had acted too independently in helping Heath, hesitantly offering an apology if her actions had made him uncomfortable. Heath reassured her, stating he wasn't uncomfortable and thanking her for her thoughtfulness. However, he urged her not to overwork herself or lie for his sake, as he didn't want to be a burden. Reina flinched slightly as Heath moved closer, but she smiled, reassuring him that he was the best partner and vowing always to repay him. Heath repeated the word partner, surprised, then laughed when Reina asked him to trust her. He agreed that they were indeed the best partners. At the party, Anna happily approached Lady Douglas, asking if she was nervous. Anna was dressed in a lovely pink gown. Anna confidently encouraged her teacher, saying they could do well together. Lady Douglas, softened by Anna's enthusiasm, gently pinched her cheek and assured her she wasn't nervous, just asking. Anna confidently replied that she would do well and asked her teacher not to worry. Spotting Ramara nearby, Anna asked if she was the one who had previously insulted Lady Douglas by calling her dirty. Comments suggested Ramara looked like the type who would say such things. Lady Douglas hesitated, then lied, denying it. Witnessing this, Anna took her teacher's hand to comfort her, promising she would protect her. Deeply moved, Lady Douglas flinched slightly, then hugged Anna tightly, emotionally replying that Anna must indeed protect her. Afterwards, Ramara approached Lady Douglas with a smirk, confidently asking if she was ready and reminding her of the plan they had discussed earlier. She revealed she had stolen the Marchioness's necklace and reiterated the plot to secretly cut Anna's pocket during her presentation, exposing her as dirty and despicable to humiliate her. Ramara promised Lady Douglas a generous reward if she succeeded, expressing confidence in her abilities. However, Lady Douglas firmly refused, stating she couldn't go through with it. Ramara was stunned and demanded an explanation, her anger rising with incredulous shouts. Lady Douglas repeated her refusal, standing her ground, trembling with resolve. Ramara accused Lady Douglas of being crazy. Unfazed, Lady Douglas replied with a wry smile that perhaps she was. She warned Ramara not to try anything foolish with Anna, making it clear she wouldn't stand idly by. With that, Lady Douglas turned and walked away. After Lady Douglas left, Ramara stood in disbelief. Furious, she muttered about how low Douglas had sunk, associating with commoners, calling them trash. Driven by frustration, she tossed the stolen necklace aside, trembling with fear, unsure what to do with it. Suddenly, someone called her name. Startled, she turned to see Margine. When Margine asked what she was doing there, Ramara grew anxious. Margine pointed at the necklace, recognizing it as her cherished family heirloom. Margine questioned Ramara about why she had it, pointing out its sentimental value as a family treasure passed down from her great-aunt. Ramara shrank back in fear, stammering denials and trying to explain. Margine, unconvinced, remarked that someone as well-bred as Ramara wouldn't take another's belongings without permission. Sweating nervously, Ramara stammered that she had merely found the necklace and was about to return it. Margine raised an eyebrow, questioning how the necklace could have simply fallen off and hinting at the possibility of theft. Seizing the opportunity, Ramara quickly shifted the blame onto an orphan child, claiming the child was too fast for her to catch. Margine feigned shock, suggesting they immediately find and hold the culprit accountable. Ramara panicked and tried to stall, arguing there was no proof. Margine pointed out that if the matter remained unresolved, it might look like Ramara herself was the thief. This terrified Ramara, making her tremble at the thought. With an almost sinister tone, Margine offered to help. She suggested using magic to discreetly place the necklace near the supposed target, stressing that Ramara needed to get close for it to work. Margine pointed towards Anna, asking if she was the target. Ramara hesitated, but confirmed, adding that getting close was difficult because of Anna's protector. Margine insisted she must do it at all costs, forcing Ramara to reluctantly agree to try. Meanwhile, Kilian, hidden nearby, was eavesdropping on their conversation. He felt annoyed with both Margine and Ramara, muttering about the increasing number of troublesome people around his sister. He considered intervening, but worried about his mother's reaction. Knowing his father had likely already noticed his presence, Kilian feared that if his mother realized he was there, she would cause a huge scene at the party, and this time it might be worse than just a scolding. Despite his concerns, Kilian thought of Reina, determined not to give up his current way of life. He resolved to avoid his mother while discreetly dealing with these troublemakers. As part of the plan, Ramara attempted to approach Anna. Remembering Jean's warning that she only needed to get close enough for the magic to activate, and that failure could lead to her being framed as the thief, she began to run towards Anna. Lady Douglas noticed, calling out loudly, questioning who was running so recklessly through the banquet hall. She called out Ramara's name just before Ramara could reach Anna. Kilian, disguised as a waiter, deliberately bumped into her. Infuriated, Ramara berated the supposed servant, but Kilian had already vanished into the crowd. Lady Douglas approached Ramara, demanding to know what on earth she was plotting. Annoyed, Ramara realized she had lost sight of Anna and muttered angrily, frustrated by the child's sudden disappearance. Meanwhile, Kilian observed from a distance, irritated by the trouble Ramara was causing. Weighing his options, he thought to himself that if it weren't for his mother, he would handle this situation differently. Resolving his internal conflict, he decided to simply end the chaos by kidnapping Ramara. Just then, Kilian spotted his parents, particularly his mother, and grew tense, thinking he might have been caught. He anxiously tried to blend into the crowd and slip away unnoticed. The Duke casually suggested to the Duchess that they should head over to Reina, and she readily agreed. Hidden amongst the guests, Kilian breathed a sigh of relief, silently crediting his father for the timely distraction. He then noticed Ramara slipping away, remarking on her quickness and muttering that this was the last thing he wanted to deal with. Deciding to act, Kilian approached Heath, grabbed him, and dragged him to a secluded spot. Startled, Heath turned and recognized him. Confused, he mentioned hearing that Kilian had run away from home due to puberty and angrily demanded why Kilian hadn't just spoken to him instead of dragging him away. Equally annoyed, Kilian retorted that as someone who had run away, he couldn't just reveal himself openly and admitted he didn't want to do this either, but needed Heath's help. Meanwhile, Esme approached her mother, Madge, feeling frustrated. She asked why she had been summoned. Madge pointed towards Anna, asking if she saw the child. Esme hesitated, but confirmed it was Anna. With a sly smile, Madge claimed she had seen Anna pocketing a butter knife. Shocked, Esme flinched at the word knife. Madge elaborated that Anna probably just wanted to play with it, but insisted it was dangerous. Since Esme was a teacher, Madge suggested she gently persuade Anna to hand it over. Caught in her mother's scheme, Esme reluctantly approached Anna. Madge smiled confidently, thinking about her plan, envisioning Esme becoming the hero who caught the thief accused of stealing the expensive necklace. She felt it was time for her daughter to take center stage at the event to stand in the spotlight. Esme approached Anna, asking if she had something dangerous in her pocket, claiming she already knew about it. Surprised, Lady Douglas asked Esme what she meant by something dangerous. Anna denied having anything in her pocket, confused by the accusation. Lady Douglas defended Anna, stating she had been with her the whole time, but Esme, influenced by her mother's ploy, insisted they should check just to be safe. Meanwhile, Madge cunningly approached Lady Annery, pointed towards Anna and subtly suggested that the precious necklace seemed to be with her. Esme, trying to coax Anna, began checking her pockets, assuring her that teacher would give her something better and offering to take the supposed knife. Anna asked confusedly what knife she was talking about, but before she could respond, Lady Annery spotted her missing necklace and cried out in shock, Esme. To her own astonishment, Esme pulled the necklace from Anna's pocket, leaving her anxious and bewildered as she realized her mother had misled her. The surrounding guests began to murmur, talking about how Esme had retrieved the precious necklace from a commoner's pocket, drawing everyone's attention. Overwhelmed, Esme understood her mother's trickery, fearing that Anna would now be wrongly accused as a thief. Esme nervously tried to explain to the crowd that Anna hadn't stolen anything. But before she could continue, Lady Douglas stepped forward, insisting it was a setup and that Anna was innocent. She accused Lady Ramara of orchestrating the scheme. Ramara, feigning innocence, confidently denied the accusation, claiming Lady Douglas was targeting her out of a personal grudge and demanding proof. She expressed outrage at being implicated in the theft and criticized the presence of commoners at the party. Offended, Reina questioned if Ramara's comment was directed at her. The Duchess, meanwhile, supported her daughter, questioning why such individuals were present at her daughter's celebration. Reina assured her mother she would handle the situation herself. Reina felt conflicted, torn between the fear of being remembered as an incompetent host and the simultaneous wish for her mother to intervene and resolve the matter swiftly. She yearned for the wealthy, leisurely life of a commoner. Meanwhile, Ramara continued her act, speaking directly to Reina, accusing the commoner child of stealing the Marchioness's necklace. When Reina questioned the evidence, Ramara pointed out that everyone present had witnessed the necklace being pulled from the child's pocket, attempting to solidify her claim. Maggie approached with a look of feigned concern, praising her daughter Esmeralda for noticing something suspicious and uncovering the supposed theft. She pretended to console Reina, yet subtly demeaned her, saying Reina couldn't possibly have known such a thing would happen, as her intentions were pure. Reina recognized the Marchioness's hidden malice, resolved not to let it affect her, and calmly responded that there was no reason to be upset. Maggie continued gloatingly, attributing the resolution of the situation to her daughter's efforts in exposing the alleged thief. Reina approached Anna with a reassuring demeanor, declaring that Anna had not stolen the necklace and stating her willingness to present evidence of her innocence. The crowd reacted with surprise, questioning if such evidence existed. Determined, Reina decided that if there was no evidence, she would create it, relying on the power that governed this world to back her words. However, just as she was about to speak, Heath suddenly appeared, silencing her by covering her mouth with his hand and announcing he would present the evidence in her stead. Heath leaned close to Reina and whispered, teasing her about potentially wanting to use her mother's influence. Flustered, Reina stammered a denial, though her uncertainty betrayed her thoughts. Heath assured her he would handle the situation, leaving Reina both confused and relieved. Heath calmly addressed Lady Annery, asking if she had spilled wine that day, which she denied, pointing out she hadn't even had any wine. He then examined the necklace, discovering it was stained with wine. He pointed out that a child as young as Anna couldn't be the culprit, as she wouldn't have access to wine. Ramara tried to deflect suspicion, suggesting Anna might have secretly drunk some wine. Reina firmly refuted this claim, reminding everyone she had given strict instructions for managing the wine to prevent such issues with the students. Heath elaborated further, stating that if the necklace was soaked in wine, the culprit's clothes would also bear significant wine stains. He confidently pointed towards Ramara, whose dress had been accidentally stained with wine earlier by Kilian, disguised as a waiter. Ramara became visibly anxious, stammering denials, and struggling to defend herself. People began to whisper, recalling how Lady Ramara had admired the Marchioness's necklace earlier, even expressing a desire to see it worn at the next party. Someone mentioned she had worn a princess's bracelet at a previous engagement party, sparking accusations of kleptomania. The murmurs grew louder, reprimanding her for her shameless behavior as she trembled with a mixture of fear and indignation at being exposed. Ramara hastily fled the scene. Reina watched her depart, wondering inwardly if Ramara's persistence in pursuing her scheme, despite knowing the potential consequences, warranted a grudging sort of admiration. Anna approached Reina, apologizing for the trouble she had caused. Reina, taken aback, reassured Anna that she had done nothing wrong, a sentiment Lady Douglas immediately echoed. Then, Lady Annery stepped forward to apologize to Anna, expressing regret for her own negligence in not securing the necklace properly and for the unjust accusations Anna had endured. Reina, moved by Lady Annery's dignified grace, felt as though she were witnessing true nobility for the very first time. Reina offered a respectful bow, apologizing for the disruption at her party, but Lady Annery graciously waved it off, insisting the fault was entirely her own. After this exchange of apologies, Lady Annery suggested they put the incident behind them. To lighten the atmosphere, Lady Annery proposed they enjoy a splendid presentation. Kneeling beside Anna with a warm smile, Lady Annery encouraged her to deliver a performance so impressive it would completely overshadow the earlier commotion. Inspired, Anna's confidence returned, and she eagerly agreed. Meanwhile, Reina made her way over to Heath to express her gratitude for his efforts in resolving the situation. Heath humbly deflected the praise, claiming he had merely done what was necessary. Reina teased him, complimenting his deductive skills as being worthy of a great detective, to which Heath hesitated for a moment before modestly accepting the praise. Curiously, Reina asked how he had known about the wine stain on the necklace, wondering if it had perhaps been a lucky guess. Heath skillfully concealed the true reason. He explained that he had simply seen a waiter spill wine earlier. Impressed by his sharp deduction, Reina compared him to Sherlock Holmes, leaving Heath both amused and slightly perplexed by the unfamiliar reference. Meanwhile, Kilian, watching from a distance, reflected on his own complex feelings towards Heath, recognizing him as a man of high status and influence, someone capable of protecting his sister. He acknowledged, with a pang of frustration, that when his sister found herself in trouble, Heath was the only one positioned to intervene effectively. Abruptly, Kilian's attention was caught by a conversation between King Christia and his chamberlain. The chamberlain inquired how the king had found her. King Christia responded that Heath's astute handling of the situation marked him as a suitable candidate for crown prince, adding that there would be no objection to her becoming the crown princess. Meanwhile, Reina felt utterly drained following the conclusion of her first successful party. She reflected with satisfaction that the event had concluded smoothly. All the students, including Anna, had completed their presentations, earning applause from the assembled nobility, notably the Marquis of Argent. She was also deeply pleased to have apparently made a favorable impression on King Christia, and she hurried back toward her room, eager to share the triumphant news with Kilian. Bursting through the door with excitement, Reina called out for Kilian, ready to recount the party's success, only to find the room empty. She let out a sigh, a mixture of pleasure and relief washing over her at the prospect of finally having her room and her comfortable bed, all to herself again, free from his presence. At the same time, back at the manor, the Duchess was incandescent with rage directed at Kilian. Seizing a sturdy cane, she advanced on him with grim determination, voicing her profound disappointment in his conduct, most especially his failure to attend his own sister's engagement ceremony. She struck him sharply with the cane, yet Kilian betrayed no flicker of pain. He put on a show of wincing, though the blow hadn't truly hurt. The Duchess fixed him with a steely glare and struck him once more, aiming for a different spot. Kilian offered an apology, prompting the Duchess to remark dryly on how resilient he had become. She lamented not having disciplined him more severely in his younger, more impressionable years, berating herself for having overlooked his increasingly wayward behavior. Kilian absorbed her words in silence, pondering their weight. The Duchess, taken aback by Kilian's words, questioned his sudden return home. Kilian explained his desire to enter the academy, wishing to remain close by to aid his sister. The Duchess was greatly surprised, particularly upon hearing his wish to help Reina. Kilian elaborated, recounting how he had witnessed attempts to cause trouble for his sister at the recent banquet and believed similar issues would arise at the academy. Moved by his words, the Duchess asked if he truly thought Reina bore all her worries alone, to which Kilian affirmed. The butler and servants, also touched by Reina's kindness, chimed in, sharing how deeply she cared for others. She even held sympathy for that dreadful prince from her childhood. They also mentioned how she would sigh deeply whenever she read news of rising housing prices, worrying about the suffering of the common people. Kilian confidently declared his intention to go to the academy and ensure that troubles like those before would not happen again. The Duchess, swelling with pride at her son's maturity, eagerly agreed. However, Kilian anticipated some resistance from his father, the Duke, who was always focused on following the proper path. The Duke responded that Kilian was due to enter the academy in 2 years anyway, questioning his haste to enroll early. Kilian explained his desire to participate in social activities, but the Duke pointed out that Kilian had been avoiding social functions even without being enrolled. Realizing his father knew of his absence from the banquet, Kilian explained he wished to spar with other noble sons, broaden his academic knowledge, and socialize with his peers. However, the Duke dismissed his reasons, noting that the family's vassals were superior in swordsmanship and that hiring scholars was faster than attending the academy. Kilian then voiced his concern about his sister being alone, which prompted the Duke to order him to depart for the academy immediately. He also instructed Kilian to report daily on any suspicious individuals around Reina, including anyone acting strangely out of jealousy, as well as the movements of Prince Christia, granting him permission to act if necessary. Kilian, though somewhat irritated, agreed to do his best. As Kilian prepared to leave, the Duke reminded him not to forget that the ducal family could cover up even murder. Kilian acknowledged his father's warning. Meanwhile, at the academy, a new etiquette teacher named Ruby introduced herself and began her lesson with a quiz to assess the students' levels. However, she was shocked and nervous when she saw Princess Reina had scored only 20 points. Ruby considered informing the ducal house about this, but quickly realized she might have made a grave error. Invited to the ducal mansion, Ruby was both excited and nervous at the prospect of meeting the renowned Duke and Duchess in person. However, unaware of the infamous letter bombing incident, she soon found herself in an awkward situation at the manor. The Duchess sternly questioned Ruby about Reina's low score on the quiz, specifically asking how her daughter could possibly receive only 20 points. Ruby hesitantly explained that Reina needed practice with table manners. The Duchess grew sterner, questioning if Ruby was implying Reina couldn't distinguish between a salad fork and a steak fork, an accusation she found appalling. Ruby found her situation at the ducal mansion increasingly difficult. Both the Duke and Duchess were furious. The Duke insisted that their daughter Reina had always behaved impeccably during meals. Ruby nervously tried to explain that Reina's quiz results indicated a lack of table etiquette, but the Duchess became even more displeased, accusing the academy of slandering their daughter. The Duke, equally agitated, demanded a plausible explanation from Ruby, as his wife seemed on the verge of fainting from shock. Overwhelmed, Ruby could not conjure a satisfactory answer. This left her feeling helpless. Meanwhile, back at the academy, the principal was also furious, threatening Ruby with dismissal if the situation wasn't rectified. This added even more pressure on Ruby, who felt utterly dejected, tears welling up as she could only reflect on how things had spiraled so disastrously. The math teacher seemed somewhat bewildered by the severity of the situation, remarking that he had expected Reina to perform well, which only further highlighted Ruby's predicament at the academy. The teachers continued their critique of Reina's performance, pointing out her ignorance of the Empire's founding year and her unfamiliarity with any of Sisfire's works. They were aghast to learn she had used a salad fork to cut her steak. The math teacher, sweating nervously, conceded that something indeed seemed amiss. Meanwhile, Reina felt the pressure mounting and hid in fear, convinced the teachers were involved in some conspiracy, attempting to boost her grades through improper means. She realized they were treating her like a project and felt a surge of indignation. Even slipping her cheat sheets, she had already received 3 and knew she couldn't afford to be caught again. Suddenly, the math teacher spotted her, calling out, "Your Highness," which startled Reina, making her fear her secret might be exposed. Anxious to divert attention from her poor performance in other subjects, Reina quickly highlighted her strength in mathematics. She nervously explained that while she might not know the Empire's founding year, Sisyphus's plays, or how to use the proper cutlery. Math was her forte. Her reasoning was sound. She had always excelled in sciences, even pursuing graduate studies, so the academy's math felt easy to her. Sensing her distress, the math teacher reassuringly took her hand, affirming that Reina was indeed proficient in math and always answered questions well in class. Reina breathed a sigh of relief, grateful to have found at least one teacher who didn't think she was a complete dunce, savoring this small victory. The math teacher expressed astonishment at Reina's homework, pointing out that she had solved one of the 10 great problems from the magic textbook, which was meant to be a formidable challenge. Reina was baffled. She had no idea she had solved such an advanced problem, assuming it was just part of the assignment. The teacher clarified that the problem had been written on the board during a casual chat, never expecting Reina to solve it instead of completing the regular homework. Reina realized the assignment had felt unusually difficult because she had unknowingly tackled a far more complex problem. The math teacher, stunned by Reina's solution, explained it was a problem scholars had spent years deciphering, praising its flawlessness, deeming it worthy of publication in a journal. Reina recognized the problem as proving why the square root of 2 is irrational, considering it merely high school level difficulty, but panicked when the teacher suggested calling her a genius, which could ruin her dream of a carefree life as a commoner. To deflect, she claimed the solution came from a reclusive, socially anxious acquaintance she knew, then quickly made an excuse to leave, the teacher calling after her. Soon after, the day of the midterm exams arrived. During the midterms, Reina found herself excelling in subjects like history and literature, confidently believing her hard work was finally paying off. Her graduate-level academic instincts remained sharp, and she felt triumphant. However, her confidence faltered when she reached the etiquette section. The first question alone was daunting, as all she could think of was asking to shake the Empress's hand, revealing her limited understanding of noble customs. With each subsequent question, the difficulty of the etiquette section escalated, leaving her feeling anxious and overwhelmed. As the teacher announced that students who had finished could leave, Reina remained seated, still grappling with the challenging questions. She felt apologetic for taking so long, blaming herself for making the test seem too easy for everyone else. Suddenly, the excited chatter of some girls nearby broke her concentration, preventing her from focusing. Frustrated, she stepped outside to address the noise, only to find, to her astonishment, her brother Kilian standing there in uniform, a smile gracing his lips. He greeted her, and when she questioned his presence, he casually announced that he would be attending the academy starting that day. A stunned Reina struggled to process the sudden news, noting how handsome he looked in a uniform, despite being technically too young for enrollment. As Kilian observed her walking somberly down the hallway, he casually inquired about her exams. Reina, clearly exhausted and upset, didn't answer directly, instead asking where his noisy admirers had disappeared to. Kilian, reading her mood, confidently guessed that her exams hadn't gone well. His words struck a nerve, and Reina snapped at him, unleashing her pent-up frustration. She accused him of ruining her test, explaining that everything had been going smoothly until his unexpected appearance had completely derailed her focus. She vividly described how she had been on the verge of writing down the answer, recalling how the Duchess would greet the Empress, only for her concentration to shatter the moment he appeared in his dashing uniform. Her frustration poured out as she squarely blamed him for the chaos during her exam. Kilian, noting Reina's distress, casually offered an opinion, suggesting that if their mother were in that situation, she would have either shaken hands or perhaps patted the Empress on the shoulder. Defeated, Reina resigned herself to failing the etiquette portion of the exam. Kilian smiled, expressing his happiness at seeing her after so long, while Reina, though slightly irritated, agreed it felt good and invited him to dinner. As they walked towards the dining hall, Kilian asked if she had been eating alone in his absence, a suggestion she vehemently denied. Inside the dining hall, whispers erupted as people caught sight of Kilian for the first time. They marveled at his appearance, recalling seeing him at the founding celebration and even discussing exaggerated rumors about him, catching an orc barehanded. The endless admiration irritated Reina, who silently fumed at the constant praise directed his way. Kilian, noticing her annoyance, calmly explained that his rare appearances in social circles made people overly curious about him. Reina was suddenly struck by a childhood memory involving her and Kilian, one that seemed to hold the answer. In the flashback, a young Kilian was throwing a tantrum, shouting that he hated the founding celebration and refusing to attend. The Duchess, visibly annoyed, demanded he obey. But Kilian angrily blurted out that Reina had not only made friends, but also acquired a boyfriend. A bewildered young Reina stood blankly, trying to comprehend what he meant. The Duke interjected, supporting Kilian's stance, stating the children had gained enough social experience, and proposing that, starting that year, their family would celebrate the festival quietly amongst themselves. This bold suggestion earned him a sharp glare from the Duchess, leaving young Reina even more confused and sweating nervously at the unfolding chaos. Back in the present, Reina reflected on how their family had avoided social gatherings since that fateful festival, realizing that most lower nobles had likely never even seen Kilian. She admitted to herself that she rarely attended such events either. When Kilian casually asked if anyone crowded around her at the academy, Reina hesitated, then recalled her first day, when students had whispered about her arriving with 5 carriages and mocked her as a commoner posing as the Duke's daughter. The memory brought a pang of anxiety, and she tried to deflect, claiming no one paid her any attention, though it stung more than she expected. Kilian seemed relieved by her answer, saying it was a good thing, but this only annoyed Reina, who accused him of enrolling just to tease her. Kilian denied it, revealing he joined the academy out of concern that she might not have any friends, wanting to be one for her. His earnest explanation only irritated Reina further, and she glared at him in frustration. Seeing Reina's serious expression, Kilian quickly realized she was upset and tried to persuade her with a light-hearted laugh, claiming he was only joking. Reina remained unmoved, insisting she was going to eat with her friends. But Kilian sincerely apologized and offered her favorite dessert to appease her. Reina chuckled, touched by his gesture, and said it was all right. She admitted it made her happy to see his smile again after so long. Although she didn't understand why he had suddenly joined the academy, his presence made her feel better. Kilian blushed shyly upon hearing her words. He tried to hide it, however, by turning his face away. Reina, oblivious to his reaction, casually suggested they return to the dormitory together after their meal. Kilian, still flushed, hesitantly agreed. To change the subject, he mentioned that she seemed to genuinely have friends. Reina, surprised, listed Esmeralda, Lady Douglas, and Heath. She mentioned that although she didn't see Heath often because he was in the advanced class, they were on friendly terms. Kilian was taken aback upon hearing Heath's name, his expression changing instantly. While passing Reina more food, Kilian mentioned that being with her made him feel inexplicably apologetic. Later, he went to the principal's office, where the principal nervously apologized for not having received any prior notice about Kilian's enrollment, leaving them unprepared to assign him a room. The principal bowed repeatedly, begging for forgiveness, but Kilian reassured him it was fine and calmly requested permission to choose his own roommate. Just as they were talking, a student entered the office, bowing respectfully to greet Kilian. Kilian kindly asked him to use his first name. The student introduced himself as Gerald Krisha, the second Prince of Krisha, and expressed the same respect. The two shook hands warmly, Kilian expressing that he had greatly looked forward to meeting him. Reina, with a serious yet adorable expression, breathed a sigh of relief, having successfully completed a task. She wondered if she should read the letter again. Then she opened a letter addressed to her from King Leopold II of Christia. The letter informed her that the king had also sent a letter to his son, but he doubted Kilian had told her about it. The king mentioned that next month, both princes would have the opportunity to attend a state council meeting. The meeting aimed to find solutions for the elding attacks during the rainy season. He expressed his belief that as a princess, Reina would want to help Heath, and looked forward to her performance, much like what she had demonstrated at the charity gala. The letter ended with a postscript where the king expressed disappointment over Reina's failure in the etiquette test. Reina let out a distressed chuckle. She felt frustrated thinking that despite her efforts at the charity gala, she had still failed the etiquette test. She couldn't understand how the king knew about her poor score and realized that attending the state council meeting was likely a test for the crown prince position. This was her chance to prove the value of her engagement contract. She called for Heath and met him in the library. There, he revealed he had also received the letter. Reina scolded him for not informing her sooner, but Heath explained that he hadn't wanted to burden her after all her hard work for the charity gala. Reina mentally apologized to herself, feeling that all the points she had gained at the gala were lost due to the disastrous etiquette test. She assured Heath that she genuinely wanted him to become the crown prince and was determined to help make it happen, suggesting they quickly strategize together. Heath agreed, but cautioned her against overworking herself. Otherwise, he wouldn't attend the meeting at all. Reina promised not to overwork herself and eagerly began planning. However, when the topic turned to the meeting's agenda, solutions for the Elding attacks, Reina grew puzzled and asked, "We're Eldings." Heath froze in shock, and Reina realized she had once again exposed her lack of basic knowledge. She felt quite embarrassed. Heath then explained that Eldings were monsters that appeared with lightning strikes. He handed her a book, the Encyclopedia of Monsters, which Reina recognized as one Kilian enjoyed reading. As Reina looked at the monsters depicted in the book, she felt shocked and anxious. Asking how many teeth it had, Heath showed her the pictures, commenting that the monster was a bit creepy but similar in size to humans and not overly threatening. He explained that the real problem with Eldings was their unpredictability. They appeared in the blink of an eye after a lightning strike, capable of tearing off roofs and attacking people inside buildings. Since their appearances were random, defending against them was difficult. Nobles were relatively safe in their sturdy castles, but commoners suffered significant losses. Reina asked how they had been dealing with the attacks so far. Heath replied that villagers either formed their own militias, or the lords dispatched monster hunting squads to handle the attacks. Reina felt relieved hearing that hunting squads were sent to deal with Eldings, but Heath explained it wasn't as straightforward as it seemed. Capturing Eldings with manpower was rare because they vanished with the lightning. The best defense was often just scaring them away. He speculated that the meeting's conclusion would likely focus on expanding support troops. Reina pointed out that this didn't solve the fundamental problem, to which Heath responded by highlighting the harsh reality of a kingdom without Asteria's protection. Unlike the Empire, he hinted that the only place truly free of monsters was the Empire where Estella resided. Overwhelmed by the information about Eldings, Reina sighed in frustration after days of research, realizing all the books repeated the same details. She thought of Kilian and soon met up with him, marveling at his genius, though she still couldn't resist teasing him about his preference for trimming the garden. Over focusing on his swordsmanship training, Kilian, with his usual calm demeanor, remarked that she was the one who had been busy lately, a hint of resignation in his voice. Reina changed the subject, asking Kilian if he had ever caught an Elding, seeking a solution to the monster problem. Kilian confidently revealed he had caught one, and then turned to leave, excited and eager to learn the method. Reina enthusiastically asked him to share his technique, to which he gave a mischievous smirk, teasingly asking what she would give him. In return, flustered, Reina offered to buy him his favorite macarons, but Kilian chuckled at her cuteness, admitting he was only joking. Adopting a serious tone, he explained that the key was to be present beforehand where the lightning would strike. Reina, initially ready to take notes, froze in confusion at his words, repeating them in disbelief, only for Kilian to confirm it again with a deadpan expression. Reina asked how Kilian could predict where lightning would strike, and he nonchalantly replied that you could see it when the lightning flashed. Annoyed, Reina questioned if she needed to run faster than lightning, which Kilian confidently affirmed. After an awkward silence, Reina, realizing the absurdity of his suggestion, grew angry and berated herself for expecting common sense from him. Kilian, still maintaining a playful tone, claimed it was his exclusive secret, adding that their father preferred catching Eldings after the strike because the flash was too blinding. Reina dismissed his explanation with a scoff, accusing him of teasing her, and they both burst into laughter. Although his advice hadn't been particularly helpful, she expressed her gratitude, admitting his presence alone was reassuring and promised to ask again if she needed him. Kilian smiled and readily agreed, telling Reina he would be waiting as she walked away. Kilian's playful demeanor sobered as he watched her leave, his thoughts turning serious as he contemplated her ignorance regarding Eldings. He remembered how he and their father had meticulously burned every monster carcass, shielding her from the grim reality. And now, the king had tasked her with resolving the monster problem. Kilian couldn't help but distrust Heath. To him, his sister was someone he needed to protect. He justified his actions, even if it meant keeping her under his watchful eye, telling himself it was for her own safety, though he knew she might find it burdensome. If only she realized the lengths he went to. Seeing Heath and Reina together ignited a simmering anger within him. He seethed inwardly, cursing Heath to stay away from her. His frustration deepened as he recalled the conversation between the king and the steward about the possibility of Reina becoming crown princess should Heath ascend to crown prince. Kilian's expression hardened, his voice cold as he questioned, "And who decided that?" Meanwhile, in the library, Heath handed Reina a drink, urging her to take a break. She thanked him warmly, impressed by how delicious the beverage looked. Heath blushed, asking about her plans for the following day. Reina hesitated, admitting she would likely continue her research, inwardly puzzled by Heath's shy expression. He then proposed a field trip, explaining that since the library seemed to offer no further useful information, visiting an area recently plagued by Eldings might prove beneficial. Before he could finish reassuring her that she didn't have to come, Reina eagerly agreed, causing Heath to flush with pleasure. Reina, overjoyed, exclaimed that Heath was the best, confessing she had felt completely lost moments before. Just before he made his suggestion, she declared she would start preparing for the field trip, but Heath revealed he had already arranged everything, reassuring her that all she needed to do was join him. Impressed by his preparedness, she teased him, pointing out that his earlier question about her plans had sounded suspiciously like a date invitation. Startled, Heath coughed in disbelief before hesitantly admitting that it had, indeed, been an invitation for a date. Reina was stunned into silence by his straightforward confession. Utterly speechless, later that evening, Kilian returned to his room, surprising Gerald with his presence. Kilian remarked that it had been a long time since he'd looked at the Monster Encyclopedia, a book he often read as a child. Gerald confessed he had been researching but felt stuck, and asked Kilian if he knew much about Eldings, his curiosity palpable. Kilian stared intently at the Monster Encyclopedia, making Gerald sweat nervously. Attempting to ease the tension, Gerald backtracked, saying it was foolish to ask if Kilian knew about Eldings, as of course he would. Kilian remained impassive, confidently stating that his knowledge of Eldings was far more detailed than anything the encyclopedia offered. He mentioned hearing about Eldings causing trouble in the duchy and offered to share more information, leaving Gerald stunned and eager to listen. However, Kilian abruptly suggested they sleep, reminding Gerald they needed an early start the next morning. Gerald, bewildered and slightly frustrated, thought to himself that Kilian seemed to enjoy doing things entirely on his own terms. Then Kilian casually announced that they would be heading to the Duneb Mountains together to hunt Eldings, as a storm was expected the next day, leaving Gerald utterly flabbergasted. Elsewhere, Heath escorted Reina to the village for their field trip, her enthusiasm evident. She eagerly suggested they first interview the villagers to gather first-hand accounts of the damage caused by the Eldings. Heath, however, gently reminded her to pace herself. He teased her for being overly enthusiastic, suggesting they eat first since there was still plenty of time before sunset. Reina agreed, and they decided to find a restaurant. When they arrived, Reina was stunned by the numerous dishes laid out before her mouth watering. Heath explained that eating well was essential for working hard. Reina, impressed by his thoughtfulness, agreed enthusiastically, declaring they made a great team. As Reina began to eat, she quickly noticed the restaurant was completely empty, which seemed unusual for peak hours. Heath laughed it off, commenting that it felt like they had booked the whole place, and she agreed, calling it good luck. After finishing their meal, Reina announced it was time to get to work to justify the feast. She eagerly asked Heath where they should begin. However, Heath tempted her with dessert, mentioning a famous cake shop nearby. Although Reina briefly drooled at the thought of sweets, she quickly refocused, insisting they start the investigation. Heath suddenly grabbed her hand, leading her to a place where Eldings had previously appeared. Reina was surprised, but followed him nonetheless. When they reached the lakeside, she was stunned by the breathtaking view. Heath hesitated, quickly retracting his hand and shyly apologizing for the abrupt stop. Reina looked at him curiously, asking what was on his mind. Composing himself, Heath explained that this lake was indeed a place where Eldings had appeared before. He added that while the weather was fine now, during the rainy season, especially during thunderstorms with lightning, this area became a hot spot for Eldings. Reina, however, felt a twinge of disappointment. She had been hoping for something more thrilling, like haunted ruins or ancient sites radiating an eerie aura. But it turned out to be just a serene lakeside. As they began their boat exploration, Heath hesitantly suggested perhaps he should have brought more cushions for comfort. Reina, slightly anxious yet excited, assured him there were already plenty. She glanced at the water, captivated by its clarity, exclaiming that it looked just like a painting. Heath smiled in agreement, noting the atmosphere was indeed peaceful. While enjoying the tranquil surroundings, Reina reminded herself it wasn't time to relax. She needed to gather useful information, so as not to be a burden to Heath. Observing the shallow waters, she noted how easy it would be for Eldings to swim under such conditions. Heath observed Reina's intense focus on her work, commenting that she was always thinking about the job. Reina proudly declared her dedication was unparalleled, ready to work far beyond her pay grade, even if it meant dedicating her entire life. She added that, just as the crown prince position was destined for Heath, she too was prepared to devote everything to her cause. Heath gently interrupted her, taking her hand and saying that while he understood her commitment, he also wanted to express that, to him, she was more than just a good partner. As he placed a light kiss on her hand, Reina was taken aback, feeling that familiar sensation from the day before, realizing her feelings for him were beginning to grow stronger. In a flashback to yesterday, Heath nervously asked if his request for a date had been too obvious. Reina hesitated, and Heath chuckled, causing her to blush. To put her at ease, Heath clarified he simply wanted to go on the investigation together, noticing she had been working hard lately and thought treating her to something nice would be good. Reina laughed awkwardly, saying she was just joking. Back in the present, Reina reflected on Heath's kindness towards her. She realized that despite his thoughtfulness, she had never considered him as anything more than a friend. Heath chuckled lightly, apologizing for being too serious earlier. He clarified that today's plan wasn't about the investigation, but rather about finding some nice places for her to relax. Reina looked distressed, realizing she had come prepared for an adventurous exploration, only to find the plans were quite different. Heath apologized, explaining that if he had told her beforehand, she might not have come. He encouraged her to enjoy the day, stop worrying, and promised it would be fun. Reina, touched by his thoughtfulness, thanked him, though still feeling uncertain about the change in plans. Gerald trembled with fear, calling out Prince Kilian's name in the desolate, eerie place, his anxiety mounting. As the surroundings grew increasingly ominous, his voice quivered as he suggested turning back. But just as he turned to look for the prince, he found Kilian gone. Panic seized him, leaving Gerald alone in the chilling silence. Suddenly, a pack of monsters appeared, charging ferociously towards Gerald. Just as the creatures closed in, Kilian arrived at the perfect moment, effortlessly showcasing his combat prowess as he struck down the beasts. Gerald, relieved yet still shaken, exclaimed, "Prince Kilian," while the prince stood calmly amidst the chaos, a victorious figure.